Hello.
Hello. I am moving my microphone around a lot. I'm sorry about that. Hello, everybody. Good evening. It's not evening. It's 1:16. But it's basically evening.
It's evening now that daylight savings time has abandoned us.
Bro, daylight savings time has completely, fucked over my concept of, time. Because I'll be like, oh, I'm so ready to go to bed. And it's 5 o'clock and it's, pitch black outside. And I'm like, I have to be awake bare minimum for another 5 hours. Because I've only been awake for, 3.
Yeah, it is genuinely alarming sometimes.
I don't like it very much at all, actually.
Neither do I.
Anyway, so I have a pre-prepared rant to go on, but first, do you have anything you want to say? Hello to everyone out there. We are now currently aware that you exist. Now that we have gotten 3 episodes out and have actually recorded since before the podcast was posted. Hello.
Hello, everybody. You lot terrify me.
We're going to really offend some British people, which is hilarious to me, but we're really going to offend some British people if we keep going on the track that we're currently going on.
I mean, it makes sense considering what we're both covering today.
An informal apology to all of the UK, not UK, just British. What is that country? England.
Got there eventually. That's all that matters.
All of the people in England, formal apology. We've come for you.
It is now your time.
You thought you could get away. Anyway, podcast talking points.
Oh,
We already
no.
talked about. Did we talk about Michael X Jason versus Freddy? I think we're past that at that point.
I don't know. I think no, because we were going to re-record
Oh yeah. We were gonna re-record episode 3,
and
I
we
was gonna
decided
talk
not
about it.
to.
Oh, okay. So no one knows about our Freddie X Michael Freddie X Jason versus Michael situation, which I don't even know how. Oh, it was because of that one TikTok.
It was because of that one TikTok, yeah.
We're like, was it Jason? Was standing outside this guy's household and
Yeah.
then looking threatening, and then he turns around and Michael Myers is right behind him. He jump scares, and then Michael just points and just walks away.
All dejected and shit, yeah.
It was great. I love that.
Yeah, because we were going off about why people were shipping Freddy and Jason on TikTok and shit, and it was oh, Friday the 13th, Freddy versus Jason. It's no, there's a Friday the 13th in October, and that's Michael Myers' time.
Michael X Jason versus Freddy. Now here's the thing. And this is totally not part of the episode, important parts, but I actually despise Freddy. Not Fazbear, but the demon one. You know what I mean? Are you okay over there?
I'm trying to figure out how to hold this. Give me a second.
Look at me.
Oh, what was that?
You heard that, right?
That buzzing?
Yeah. Like when you turn on an old TV.
Yeah. It's giving Stray Kids vibes. No. Oh no. I killed Mythos. What's it like dating the fighting? What's it like dating the funniest person alive?
Oh my god, I was about to ask you that. It's so here's the thing. I'm not here to start any kind of fights or anything.
I am.
But I am a Stray Kids fan. I am a stay. I've been to their shows before, so has Psychos. I absolutely love Stray Kids. I love them. And they just released a new album, which it's not a mini album, but it's the size of a mini album. It's only 5 or 6 songs, I think. And look, when we were in the car, I was taking Psychos to work, and it was the day that the album had dropped, and I did not pre-order every single album. But if we have time today, we should totally go to Target and see if they have any. But for
I
S class, I bought every S class. I bought every single version except for the mini ones and like the cardboard whatever ones. And then we have all of Maxident, and then we have 2 of Ordinary, and then I have 1 No Easy album. So I didn't order all of this new Rockstar Comeback, even though it was in my Target cart to order just in case, but I didn't. But anyway, we were listening to the songs, and anyone who knows K-pop knows that idols cannot curse like at all. It's like very, very like taboo. And then in S class, they kind of like dropped a song where it kind of sounds like Han curses, and he's like, "Oh no, JYP, it's this word. I didn't curse. It's our dishes are so bussin', not this shit." And everyone was
You're
like,
good with that.
"Oh my god, Han, like I love you for this." And then this new album drops, and it's a song that they didn't tease at all, or it's a section of the song that they didn't tease at all. I don't know what it was.
Oh, it was Complex.
Yes, and Felix fully says a curse word,
He
and
fully says shit.
but in in the lyrics, it's that one word is in Korean. It's written like English to Korean, kind of like sounds. I don't know if you know
He
if it's a
says
word in
shit
Korean.
though.
And
He
then
fully
on
says
the
shit.
translation, on the English translation lyrics, it says shoosh. SHOOS. It's just shoosh. I don't give a shoosh.
You don't give a shoosh.
Felix gives no shoosh. I'm 90% certain that's what it says. And we were in the car. We were at a red light, first of all. We're at a red light, and we're sitting there, and that plays, and I immediately paused it, and me and Psychos just looked at each other like, did we just hear that right? Because I was bamboozled. I was flabbergasted.
No, because like I'm sorry, I'm laughing at this because like my jaw dropped and then you immediately paused it and we just like stared at each other for like a good second.
And to be fair, everyone on TikTok has lost their goddamn mind over the fact that Felix cursed. And I also lost my goddamn mind about the fact that Felix cursed.
It's in the pre-chorus too.
Yeah, like it happened like every single time. It was bonkers. Anyway, so in the off chance, in my Delulu brain that anyone from Stray Kids listening to this, that was amazing. And one of your songs that sounds like the pre-chorus, one of the songs sounds like it has the same section as their pre-chorus for S Class.
It does. I don't remember which song it was, but
Well, also the beginning of S Class has the Venom thing in it. So I think he just does that, which actually might be on purpose. Like the title track of Venom wasn't the title track though.
no, it wasn't. But it was a very good, very very good.
Venom was great. Anyway, I have more rants scheduled. So here's the thing. I don't like breakfast.
Oh
I'm about
god!
to st-
I thought we were just gonna do the one and then like save the rants for later, like for other
no. Because here's the thing. Here's the thing. Is it? I originally, when we were gonna re-record the part of last episode, and we decided not to. We were gonna re-record it. I had a whole rant planned for that one day that we
Oh yeah,
remember where we went to work. Oh my god! And then it happened again this last week. Remember?
Like, oh, whenever I was at the meeting, yeah.
So
Oops.
now I have really strong words from McDonald's. Okay, so here's what happened. I hate breakfast. Anyone who knows me knows. Shut up. I got a notification on my phone.
Another one of your hoes.
No,
A
yeah,
hoe
one
from
of
a
my
different
hoes from
area
this
code.
gigantic Discord that I'm in. So here's the thing. Anyone who knows me knows that I don't like breakfast food, and I'm trying to get out of this. The thing is I do like breakfast foods, but I don't like breakfast because we wake up at like 11 anyway. I have very strong opinions about breakfast, and I have even stronger opinions about breakfast places, but we've already said too much. So here's the thing. So the only place that I really, really get jazzed about breakfast for is McDonald's breakfast. I know it's shit, okay? I know it's like processed garbage or whatever, But you don't understand, okay? It's good. If I'm gonna eat breakfast, it's gotta be like shit, right? Picture this. Me and Psychos are going to work, and it is rainy and cold as fuck that day. We have to go to work super, super early in the morning, which to us is like 10 o'clock.
Gross.
But keep in mind that we get home from work at like 2 o'clock in the morning sometimes. So we work kind of late. So we have to get up super early and head in and whatever. And I realize it's before 10:30, right? And McDonald's on the app will not let you order breakfast after 10:30, but you can order it up to 10:30. So it's like, okay, cool, whatever. So we're driving to work, and if we order by the time that we leave work or leave like our house, then by the time that we get to work, it'll like be delivered. So it's like perfect timing. So I have Psychos put all of the food in the cart to order. And this is before 10:30, by the way. Put all the stuff into order. And then we go to check out, and it's like, no. Like, there's something wrong with your payment method. And I'm like, the fuck there isn't. I have enough money. Give me my food. So then Psychos tries to put the order through again, and it's still rejecting it, right? And then we try to put the order in again, and it freaking is like, oh, these items aren't available right now, and it's still before 10:30. Which, like, why would you have the cutoff be 10:30 if you're not going to let us put food in at 10:26 or whatever? Like, shut the fuck up. So I'm like, okay, cool, fine, whatever. So we get to work. I'm like, okay, you know what? I couldn't order breakfast from there, but Psychos really wants breakfast, and I'm not going to tell Psychos no because I'm a pushover. And
Wait a minute. You still wanted breakfast too. Don't put this on me.
No. I remember I don't like breakfast. So
no, you still wanted breakfast though.
So I order breakfast from this little place like down the street from us, right? And you ordered like pumpkin waffles? No, pumpkin pancakes. These things were like the size of Psychos' head. These things were huge. There was 3 of them.
Pumpkin pie pancakes. And they had like little pecans on them. It was so good.
So Psychos orders that and a hot chocolate. And I ordered okay, Psychos is gonna bully me for how I eat this, but we'll get into that in a second. I order Belgian waffle with strawberry and cream and hash browns. No. Keep your mouth shut. Yeah, I see you over there. So we ordered that, and I don't know if I ordered anything else. I ordered a bunch of stuff, right?
Yeah, you ordered like
Actually,
you
you know
ordered
what?
like
I'm gonna
hash
pull it up
brown.
on my goddamn phone because I'm
Oh,
so
no.
mad about this. And keep in mind, this is already on the day where we like tried to order breakfast, and it just like on McDonald's, and McDonald's was like, "Go fuck yourself." I'm gonna pull up this order because I'm so mad about it. Here it is.
Oh god.
I ordered scrambled eggs and hash browns. That's what I ordered.
Oh yeah, because I remembered it being like a protein or something similar.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I
yeah.
just couldn't remember what it was.
So I order this, right? And it's not cheap. Like this is like $50 for all of this, plus a $5 tip. So like I'm spending $55 on this fucking breakfast, right? And this isn't like shitty breakfast. This is like gourmet. Like this waffle was huge, right? We get the food. First of all, they're out of hot chocolate, which I don't know how the fuck you're out of hot chocolate.
I was very sad by that. Like I was so
know.
upset. I was so ready to drink this like warm elixir of goodness, and it's like,
And you got water.
I got water instead.
So you got your pumpkin pancakes and your 2 thick bacon slices. You got that. I got my Belgian waffle with my strawberries and cream. I did not get my scrambled eggs or my hash browns, and they were out of hot chocolate, which I don't fucking understand. And I don't know what is going on with places recently, but also I've ordered Panda Express to work in the last week twice. Both times they did not bring me my drink. And here's the thing, I'm not the kind of person to complain about shit like this. I'm very understanding about stuff like this. It's not the driver's fault. I just don't fucking understand why you forgot my drink twice. And then Psychos is at a meeting with our manager at a different location this week. Keep in mind, I'm sitting on the floor while Psychos is meeting with like our like owner or whatever, and I'm sitting on the floor with our general manager, or like district, kind of a district manager, like manager of all of the locations. And we're like talking, and I'm like, oh my god, like it's before like 10:30. I could totally fucking order McDonald's breakfast, right? And then we can order it for pickup at the McDonald's that's closer to our house. So I go to fucking order it, and I have the money, and we're trying to figure out what the fuck Psychos wants, and we're trying to like read Psychos's mind, and my manager was wrong, by the way. We figure out what Psychos wants, and we go to put the order in, and it's like, half the items that you picked are not available during this time of day. And the only thing that it let me try to order was the fucking hash browns that I redeemed points for, because I have too many points on the McDonald's app. But it was like, oh, the big breakfast or whatever, and whatever the fuck you wanted, it's not available. But it's like, it was like 10:20. I don't. So this last month, I've just been cursed with breakfast food, and I already don't like breakfast foods. So anyway, that's my rant. I'm really mad about it.
R.I.P.P. man. I love you though.
Well, your food was fine the whole goddamn time.
Hey, I didn't get my McDonald's breakfast either. Don't even.
Yeah, but you got your freaking pancakes and your bacon strips, so. But you didn't get your hot chocolate, so.
I didn't get my hot chocolate.
Which, aren't you lactose intolerant?
Yeah, but
you also forgot to rant about how I eat my strawberries and cream on my Belgian waffles.
Fuck you! I hated it. Okay, so most normal people put their
it was a treat.
strawberry.
Okay, it was a treat. It was a little treat. I'm a little guy. I wanted to.
Let me finish.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So, no. Most people put their, like, strawberries and cream on the Belgian waffle to eat, right? No.
No, that's not.
Right? No. So, here's what Mythos does. They take a spoon, they stir up the strawberries and cream, and then they eat it, and then they eat
it's
it, like,
a little
by itself.
treat.
No, you're supposed to eat it on the waffle.
But why would I do that?
Because that's what's supposed to happen.
No, it's a little treat on the side.
That's like putting milk first in cereal.
No, that's just inherently wrong. That's different, okay? That's like me eating the milk and the cereal separate, which is just a snack. I don't eat dry cereal, by the way.
This is... God, we have been recording for like over 20 minutes. No. No, and we still haven't like mentioned at all what our topic today is.
I am so excited and nervous for my topic, because I'm going to piss off a lot of people.
I am going to make all of y'all depressed. Yay! But that's pretty much par for the course at this point.
Welcome to oh my god, that was loud. Welcome to episode 4.
4.
Everybody.
We can only count to 4.
I can only count to 4. That's a great song, by the way, if no one's ever heard that song. What are we talking about today? First of all, okay. Preemptive warning. I am going to piss some people off with this story. And if I have pissed you off, I don't care and I'm not sorry. Because if you're pissed off, then you're pretentious.
I mean, yeah, that's fair. Oh gosh. Today we are talking about
goth culture.
And
I'm talking about goth culture.
And then in my case is very well known within the goth community.
Which is weird because isn't it like it's like it's not goth though.
She technically was more punk,
yeah,
and more along that end of things.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of those things where the community like of alternative subcultures really kind of like
all adopted it,
like all rose up.
So this is kind of a chaotic assortment of information because it is really hard to like pin down this stuff. I do have a list of references and links to a lot of videos, and I actually ended up finding another thesis that was
and your thesis.
I found it. I don't know how. But I did find another thesis about this, and I'm gonna get the name right this time because I really fudged it up on the first one. So this is written. It's called The Evolution. I'm just gonna go ahead and credit it now at the top of the episode, so I don't have to worry about it later. But it's called The Evolution of the Perceptions of the Goth Subculture. and it is by Sabrina Newman. It was a thesis. Oh my god! It was a thesis submitted to the Honors Department of Johnson and Wales University School of Engineering and Design in May of 2018. So, to Sabrina Newman, I did read this entire thing through. I did snag some information, but it is very interesting. I think she is also a goth herself, so that is super cool. I did not I went a little bit of a different direction with this, but it's a very good read. It'll be linked on the notes, which we will post on Patreon whenever we decide to get anything else up on Patreon. So that is there, but I'm letting you guys know now that that is a thesis that I found that was very interesting, and I'm always willing to support.
The Patreon is technically up and running. There's just no tiers, and everything is free.
Fair enough. Also, are we just gonna go ahead and jump into mine now that we're here?
I think that we probably should go ahead and jump into yours because yours provides like some history and like more
History.
herstory,
Okay. So
theirstory.
I will let you know, I do have a little bit of a dark section in the middle here. I'm not going to get too in depth because I think it might be something that you want to cover in the future. But immediately after it, I have funny YouTube comments. So
The funny YouTube comic section is back, and I'm so hype.
okay, so I am going to be talking today to everyone about the subculture of goth. So this was something that I did actually just rip directly from her thesis, and I'm sorry about that. What is a subculture? A subculture is a segment of a culture which shows different customs, norms, and values compared to the like overall culture it came from, with some similarities. So I wanted to start this deep dive by going into because I want to go into the music aspects of it first because goth is a music-based subculture. Matcha ASMR.
What is up with you and doing some sort of ASMR in every
It's my true
episode?
calling.
You wanted to be an ASMR artist, and you're like,
Me too. I'm sad that
okay.
I can't be because I have such a booming voice. So I want to start this off by saying that, technically speaking, I don't consider myself a goth, but I am a goth, which is, I think, par for the course, it seems like, with all other goths. But I am, technically speaking, a goth. Now, I listen to like a fucking slew of music. I literally just went on a rant about Stray Kids, so would I consider myself like a down to the bone, everything is black goth? No. Would I fuck the singer from Typo Negative? Yes. So
Yeah, it's a problem.
am I obsessed with Eric Draven from The Crow? Do I currently have 2 figures of him? Yes. Do I like The Cure? No.
I do, and that's
You like
on
The
me.
Cure. So
No, like I do kind of like.
I also realized while doing this research that I grew up goth/goth adjacent to a lot of things. So a lot of the things that they mention, a lot of bands that are mentioned, either I was exposed to when I was younger, or I did just listen to these bands and songs. And it was really weird because actually while I was doing the research for this, there's a song that I absolutely love, and I'll get into in a second. There's a song that I really really like, and I like most versions of it. You were the one who pointed out that that song is actually technically goth, and I was like, what do you mean? And I just went down a rabbit hole. So
Yeah, I personally didn't really grow up goth. Like I wasn't growing up goth and emo and like that sort of thing. Like those comments were sort of banned from my household. They didn't. My parents refused to like
you grew
ignore.
up in like a religious cult of a household.
Yeah, kind of. And
Whereas like I grew up kind of like punk and metal head adjacent. Because I grew up in the I was born in the late 90s, grew up into the early 2000s, all that shit. So I was too young for the first and second gen wave of goth, but I grew up like technically punk adjacent, because punk still kind of stayed, and like metalhead adjacent. So they're not the same, but they do kind of have influences on each other to some points where even some people kind of link metalheads in with goth just a little bit. But since goth was born out of punk, I technically grew up like goth. So like a lot of songs that are considered like goth or by goth bands, like I do know and have listened to. I just, I wouldn't consider myself a goth, but we'll get into it.
I am trying to wedge myself into that romantic vampire goth.
You're doing great. I've got you a few dresses that I think look great.
Yeah, the dresses, like I do have
I also
a few.
have that one tea dress that I never wear, but I love it.
Yeah. I'm slowly working on being the person I wanted to be.
Oh, religious trauma.
It's so nice. It lends itself very well to any aesthetic.
It does. It really does. We'll also get into that. Oh, you thought
Oh
I was gonna
no.
avoid it? Okay, so
Oh no.
goth is originally considered to be a music-based subculture. It typically is considered to have popped up sometime in the late 70s, early 80s. But I actually went into a deep dive by I think it was Trash Rant. It did an excellent video on this, so a lot of this information has been pulled from there. And I just kind of filled in where I could. So again, big shout out to that video. But the first kind of spark, the twinkle of goth in punk's eye actually dates a lot farther back to 1955 with the release of the song I Put a Spell on You by Screamin' Jay Hawkins.
Yeah. This is
And
one of my
this
favorite
song,
songs.
I love this song. And I have this specific version, like the original version of the song. I love it. I like some of the covers. I don't like the one from I don't like Hocus Pocus. I'm sorry for anyone who was hoping that I would. And I don't like the version of the song that's in there. Like it's a great song, but like as a cover,
Okay.
You like Hocus Pocus.
I do. I really do. Although it is a little weird that we're all just ragging on a teenage boy for being a virgin for an hour and a half.
I do that. Not to a teenage boy, but we have a friend that has a boyfriend and they're very cute together. But I constantly call him a virgin. I think it's funny. To be fair, so does his mother. So anyway, I Put a Spell on You by Screamin' Jay Hawkins. It was a ballad that was originally inspired by Pledging My Love by Johnny Ace, which I also recently saved and do love that song. And it's your kind of typical 50s like sweet like R&B love song, just like pretty typical for the times.
Pretty typical for the times.
Yeah, no, I just wrote something in my notes. I'm like, what the fuck does that mean?
What does this mean to you?
What the fuck was I on? Pledging My Love was a blues love song. Now, for Screamin' Jay Hawkins, he had originally wanted to create a song that sounded like the literal version of putting a spell on someone, the kind of possessive music version of a spell, to make someone fall in love, as opposed to the, oh, I'm giving you my love, you've entranced me. It's kind of a reversal of that power a little bit.
You know, like, I love you, so you have to love me. I'm going to make you love me. And
Basically,
it's very nice. I love it.
it's a very good song. So they had originally recorded the song in 1955. Stop eating your microphone. But
My mic
Screamin'
was
Jay
muted.
Hawkins and their manager had decided that they felt like the song was a little too stiff. So they re-recorded it again in 1956 after getting blackout drunk, which mood.
The best way to do anything.
Literally. So they recorded the song, and I think I remember seeing somewhere that Screamin' Jay Hawkins actually has no recollection of recording the song ever. And he, in the song, and I don't know if he got this name before or after the song was released, but in the song, you can hear him screaming and sounding like he is being overcome and possessed by something. And that was kind of what gave the song its edge. The lyrics were taken a lot more seriously compared to the Pledging My Love version, and because of the way it sounded, it was actually banned from the radio at the time.
Which, honestly, you guys all suck for getting that song banned. You guys suck for getting that song banned.
Which is ironic because now it's typically on like the top 100 Halloween music playlists CDs that you can get at like freaking Walmart or something. Like I
For like
remember listening to that
$5.
song.
Yeah. It's a great song.
It is a very good song.
People in the 50s were wild.
Well, I mean, yeah. This song was one of the first instances of dark themes being brought into main pop music. I'm sure there was like darker music that was going on at the time, but this was the first time that I think a pop song had actually been more serious. Stephen J. Hawkins brought a very theatrical twist to this song. And when he was actually doing the stage performances, he would add in a lot of theatrics. There would be smoke machines. He would rise out of a coffin. He would have something akin to like the stereotypical witch doctor costume kind of stuff that you'd find at like Spirit Halloween. Like he would have a top hat and bones and stuff like that. It was very theatrical and dark. Thinking of Dr. Vasilier from
Princess and the Frog.
yes, it
Ooh.
was very reminiscent of that, the same kind of color palette, stuff like that. It was very intense, and this wasn't something that was very common at the time. So this is usually credited with being where the theatrical side of goth music comes from, especially the like stage performance aspects of it. So this is where we're kind of seeing the first glint of like what goth would become back in 1955, which is crazy.
Dear God.
Also, if you're one of those, I've heard this opinion a lot, that if you're someone who does not acknowledge Screamin' Jay Hawkins influence on goth culture, you're racist. Which I won't agree with, but I will say that it is important to mention that, like, as most subgenres have come out and have like most genres of music in general, they tend to go back to some form of the black community and black music. So it was originally blues, which I think also wasn't rock originally blues as well.
I think rock was originally blues as well. Like almost every type of music we have today, and I think even classical music to a point has connections to the black community.
Fun fact: did you know that the strings on old string instruments used to be made of animal intestines?
Unfortunately,
Anyway,
and and I live every day and regret that I know that.
I didn't put a year for this. Hang on.
Ooh.
When did this song come out? Jumping forward to 1967, we have the release of the song The End by The Doors. This song is 11 minutes and 43 goddamn seconds long.
No. I'm sorry. If a song is longer than like 7 or 8 minutes, I have a very hard time sticking with it. And Sleep Token, I love you, but some of your songs are getting up there and I'm like, guys, please.
I did not do a lot of research into this song. It's just not my vibe. But I will just read what I have here. So the lyrics were dark and poetic, and apparently Ed Sullivan, who I'm not sure if he was the singer or just a member of the group, he had raw sex appeal.
Gross.
The song was about a breakup with a girlfriend, and the lyrics were focused mostly on death and dying. I also really like this quote that they brought in from Jim Morrison. It says, "Sometimes the pain is too much to examine or even tolerate. That doesn't make it evil, though, or necessarily dangerous. But people fear death even more than pain. It's strange that they fear death. Life hurts a lot more than death. At the point of death, the pain is over. Yeah, I guess it is a friend." Which is an interesting way to look at it.
That, I mean, okay.
He
I guess
must
that's
have
fair.
really been upset about that girlfriend. What did this man go through? This
What
is
did
the
she do
first.
to him?
Uh, so in my notes it says that this is the first group to be dubbed goth. I'm not going to agree with that. I think maybe in later years this is kind of where that inspiration comes from, but the influence that we see from this specific song is the really really dark lyrics. It's also a song that had organs, jazz drums, and kind of wispy eastern sounding guitars. When I say eastern, the stereotypical idea of like a sitar or something like that, that kind of sound, it kind of introduced that, which you'll see kind of influences of like Eastern culture in a lot of these songs musically. And also, I'm talking about this as someone who is not majoring in or has any deep knowledge of music. So, trying to make this easy for people who aren't musically literate to understand. So, next, we're still in 1967. This is when Venus and Furs by the Velvet Underground comes out. These lyrics were also much darker than normal lyrics at the time, talking about BDSM and such. This might be one of the first instances of BDSM being linked to the goth community as well.
Which is hilarious because Rihanna released a hit song S&M like years later and it like got broadcasted all over the radio. And young me had no business listening to that, and I bet this song also got like stricken from radio.
Well, at the time, I don't know if any of these bands were considered to be very mainstream enough to enter the radio scene. I think just Screamin' Jay Hawkins was a little bit more popular at the time.
Oh, okay.
So, and we've listened
I
to
see.
these songs before. We listened to the Velvet Underground together because I wanted you to listen to some of it. So,
Yeah, and I actually I really did like the song.
I like the Velvet Underground. You and I both hated the next point that I have, but I got to get to the Velvet Underground first. Sorry, I'm all snotty. So, I don't know if it was just this album or just the Velvet Underground in general. They used what was called ostrich guitar tuning, which is where they would tune the guitar strings to all be the same note. So the music that would come out of it would sound very droning and kind of, I don't want to say monotone, but just very like the guitar is drugged.
That's a very interesting way of putting that.
I don't know how to explain it. This kind of droning sound becomes a huge staple in goth music later on. The main feature of the band was a woman named Nico, whose voice was described as sounding like a cello getting up in the morning. She does have kind of a lower register voice, and she does also have that droning sound that people really liked from the guitars. It fit really well. And then a year after this album was released, Nico left the band. So, jumping to 1968, we have the Marble Index, which was released by Nico from the Velvet Underground. From what I had heard, she'd actually left the band, moved across the country, I think out to California, and just like basically reinvented herself. Her debut solo, Chelsea Girl, was written by other songwriters. After that, she stepped back and wrote her own original album that was more true to herself, and this is the one that we listened to together. She used it to step away from the kind of stereotypical blonde and beautiful look that she had because she was a German girl, she was very sweet, very petite looking, big eyes, blonde hair, kind of that like stereotypical like blonde look. She ended up coloring her hair blood red and started wearing all black. And she's kind of dubbed as the first modern goth girl because of the way that she looked. And it wasn't necessarily that she was trying to go for a goth look because it wasn't really a thing at the time. She was just trying to do the exact opposite of what she was used to. I think most of the photos of her actually have her in white. And then when she released the Marble Index, she's pretty much completely in black.
Similar to what like child stars do whenever they like
Think like
start.
Dove Cameron.
Yeah, like Dove Cameron did it. I know Miley Cyrus went full like sexual, but it was like most of these child
I think
stars.
she was trying to cope.
Yeah, a lot of these child stars do stuff like this, like Amanda Bynes did, where they'll go from the extremely cute and innocent look that Disney and other companies have them do to something like the direct opposite. So she could have been just doing the same thing where she was just trying to shed whatever image she had, and it worked out for her in some ways.
I think
Didn't
it's
work
yeah.
out
I
for
think
her in
it's just
others.
trying to go being one direction, then trying to go really aggressively the other direction. I think they're not raised in that area to know that there's a middle ground. The songs from the Marble Index are very haunting, almost insane sounding. And we listened to this together, and that is pretty accurate. It's not my it's not my cup of tea, but it is. It's very weird. It sounds like an acid trip.
Yeah, for people who are listening who know what the Magnus Archives is, the best way I can describe her music is like if the Spiral made music.
It really is just it's weird. It's like if you threw a bunch of instruments into a tornado and then put a microphone in the middle. um,
Accurate.
a it has fits of random piano, out of tune sounding instruments, odd percussion, and speak singing vocals. Again, just really crazy. Apparently, the producer said it made him feel suicidal, but it was beautiful. It didn't follow the normal song structure of any rock or pop music. It was very unique. I'm gonna say it just wasn't great. That's me personally. I just didn't like it. It does not that it doesn't follow any normal structure. It just doesn't have a structure. It's like every 10 seconds was recorded months apart and no one listened back to what the first 10 seconds before sounded like.
Yeah, like it felt very all over the place. I'm sure like if you're in a certain mood, this album would be great for you to listen to, but
Like on
personally,
drugs.
oh gosh, imagine being on a trip and listening to that. That's gonna that might end up being a bad trip. But like I think it's very good for like inspiration. Like if you're trying to get into a certain mood for like a certain character or something, like if you were writing, like that would be great to listen to like get certain scenes done. But like it is a very specific mood you have to be in to intake to like take in her music.
Agreed. So jumping to 1971, so we're going from 1968 to 1971, we have the release of Dead Babies by Alice Cooper. I know it's kind of a weird jump to go from seemingly like indie sounding punk bands to like Alice Cooper, but I promise there's a point. So we've hit the 70s, and a lot of rock albums in the 70s hit with the theatrics. A lot of rock bands at the time were very theatrical, like 70s hair bands kind of, but they all had these like weird ambiance. And when I say ambiance, I mean like when you look up like Halloween ambiance music and it's like bells and crows and like that kind of stuff, like the spooky sounds. It's kind of like that. But Alice Cooper kind of took all of it and melded it together. He used dramatic makeup. He did like stage performance type acts, and he had a lot of classic goth fashion when on stage. It's not considered goth at the time, but looking back, it is kind of classic goth. The lyrics are very dark and almost sick in nature. They were very blatant about a lot of dark themes, which can be very nauseating for certain people depending on what you're triggered by. During the song Dead Babies, he literally cut up baby dolls on stage and ended the song with hanging himself, not literally, but theatrically, just to kind of prove a point, but also to be that shock factor on stage. That wasn't really common at the time.
I remember you telling me about the bit about like the cutting up the baby dolls on stage, but not about the part where he like
Can't tell you everything.
fake hung himself. Like, I'm sorry, what?
We're almost there, I promise. So, 1973 to 1977, we have the glam rock era. There's a wide assumption that a goth evolved from punk, but this video by Trash Theory argues that it derived from glam rock. And you do actually see glam goth is specifically derived from glam rock kind of aesthetic. Aesthetically, the clothing, music, and the loose sex culture would later influence goth. So the fashion flashy look of it, and also just the aggressively I'm gonna have sex with everything, beat me up while I do it kind of thing, kind of trickles over later into goth. A lot of the British goth bands, which goth did kind of come out of England, which is really interesting, they were inspired a lot by glam rock. The music features abstract instrumental sections, dark thematical lyrics, and monotone and droning vocals. So we have those droning vocals back again, and the music. David Bowie was very experimental when it came to ambiance, and he had a lot of electric sounding music, a lot of synths and stuff like that. And Robert Smith from The Cure actually said that he was directly influenced by the album Low. No information there. I finally mentioned Robert Smith, and you're not screaming and crying.
Hey, you make me sound like I am like this diehard Cure fan. I'm not. I enjoy The Cure.
We have a friend who really likes The Cure.
We have a friend who would literally, yeah, making fun of him, and he's not here to defend himself.
He doesn't need to be here to defend. He couldn't defend himself if he was in the room with us. It's the defense in the room with us.
Anyway, no. So for me, The Cure was kind of my first. No, I lied. Technically, Evanescence was my intro to that darker music, which is wild because my dad really liked it. And if you especially know like a lot of shit about my parents, it's very surprising.
Fuck your dad. Anyway, so
The Cure was kind of like that second, like, oh, I kind of like how this sounds. Let me dive further into it.
Yeah, I got you. Okay, so 1977, we have Suicide, Frankie Teardrop. I'm assuming it's either the band is called Suicide and the song is called Frankie Teardrop, knowing by how I wrote everything, but it feels like it should be swapped. So the band Suicide was formed in 1969, and it was one of the first self-proclaimed punk bands. So we're seeing the rise of punk, which I feel like it should have been way sooner. It used a lot of synths and whatever a drum machine is, because I still don't fucking know. I'm assuming it's a computer program. It gets used a lot later because they didn't use guitars or drums. They used whatever the fuck a drum machine is. So there's that. The most upsetting and gothic song they had was the song Frankie Teardrop. It's the story of a young father who was basically a family annihilator. You're welcome. Killing his family over his severe poverty. The song is considered actually terrifying, having screeches mixed into the song. And for the time, I imagine that was pretty jarring. Now that's pretty normal, but I mean, it's whatever. Apparently, it shocked the singer who did it. He was even surprised he could make those sounds. There's also a lot of reverb in the song. Reverb. Oh my god, that's such a hard word to say. Which is pretty common in goth music. So you've got the droning, you got the reverb, you got the theatrics. We're starting to see, and you've got the glam aesthetic. So you're kind of to see how all these different things are going to accumulate into, you know.
Yeah. And I think it's very interesting that the song about the family annihilator actually uses one of the main reasons for family annihilation. That's the poverty. Like, for instance, John List, who is like one of the first major family annihilators, actually killed his family because they were deep in debt. So it was one of those things.
Yeah, and this is a consistent thing that you're gonna find in a lot of goth songs, and like, well, I mean, this was punk, so a lot of punk really talks about like inequality and issues with the government, which I will always support true punks in that. Next, we have 1978 with our favorite song, "Human Fly" by the Cramps. Remember this song?
Yeah, this is your favorite song. This is not mine.
I don't like this song.
Nobody
I don't like
likes
this
it.
song. I don't like
People-
this song. My first bullet point under the Cramps Human Fly is, why is he eating the microphone? Because every single video they post of the Cramps, if you go back and watch the video, every single goddamn clip of the Cramps is just the singer literally eating the fucking microphone.
I mean, it was okay up to the point where he started buzzing, and that's when I was like, guys, please.
Anyway,
That's gonna get me like I feel like us giving critique on certain things is gonna get us.
I know. We're gonna piss some people off. So the Cramps was considered psychobilly, which is inspired by rockabilly, which we'll get into later. And it has a lot of those abstract rock sounds, but it's a weird fucking ride. Human Fly kind of cemented the musical aesthetic of the Cramps. There was a very heavy commitment to the idea of a Halloween style creature being played in a song. He sang it in a way that made him actually sound like a human fly, which is wild. And there's a heavy link between horror and goth music at this time, and you kind of see this happen later on. The Human Fly was actually a B-rate movie at the time. That it was just terrible. But I mean, not the movie, the song, but still can't get over it.
A
So
B-rate song.
it's a something. So I'm sure there are people that love the Cramps. It's just not me. I mean, I've already said I don't like the Cure, so
Yeah, but I feel like The
I feel
Cure
like
and the Cramps
elitist.
are on two different levels here.
Yeah, but I feel like elitist goth people don't know if I'm like goth or not, because they're always like, "Oh, if you only like The Cure, then you're not goth." And it's like, okay, I like other goth bands, but I don't like The Cure. And they're just like,
How can you be goth and not like The Cure? People who get so up in arms about like the
I've
purity
known
of
people
goth,
like this.
it is
I've literally
so wild to
I've
me.
told you this. I know people like this. I've met people. I'm not friends with people anymore, but I've seen people that I know be like, if you only listen to these bands, then, or if you listen to these bands, then you're not considered goth. And they throw like emo bands and they're like MCR and stuff like that. But like the idea that like, oh, if you only listen to The Cure, then you're not really goth. And it's it's people who dress trad goth. Not like, I'm not saying this is trad goth, but this person that I'm thinking of was like a trad goth, but also like a fast fashion trad goth. We'll get into it in the fashion area. So moving on from the Cramps, because I don't want to deal with it anymore. Post punk, 1978 to 1982. Punk music, specifically born out of the UK, brought alternative music to the mainstream, which gave goth a stepping stone into the mainstream as well. Also, it gave credibility to loud and angry music, and the fashion of the people who listened to it was also kind of validated. Punk bands began to move towards more experimental sounds, and they were much less politically influenced as far as the lyrics went. And you'll see this with a lot of punk bands that technically moved closer towards goth, though they'll never admit themselves as goth. But they did get kind of record deals, and they did actually get like mainstream publicity. So it kind of put goth into the center stage, which will then cause later on like The Cure getting played on MTV in the US and stuff like that. Susie Sue, the front woman for Susie and the Banshees, which another unpopular opinion, I don't really like Susie and the Banshees. I'm not saying that I hate them, I just don't listen to it. She was inspired by Egyptian style makeup designs and electroshock black hair, which just means hair that makes it look like you've been struck by lightning, because I didn't know what the fuck that meant either. This is where I kind of have a love-hate relationship with goth, because it does pull a lot from other cultures, and that actually gets changed. It kind of flips in the last like decade or so, but original goth was kind of heavy on the appropriation of makeup, which I don't really know if it came from an area of appropriation or more just appreciation for it and the look of it, the very eccentric look compared to what people were probably used to in the UK and the US at the time, but stealing that kind of makeup look and inspiration from a lot of Middle Eastern cultures and African cultures was just kind of very common, and later on they kind of come in and infringe on paganism as well, but who doesn't? The band had sounds and instruments that weren't common in punk and songs that were consistent all the way through instead of feeling like it was trying to reach an end, is how it describes. So instead of ramping up to something huge at the end, it just kind of stayed more consistent all the way through as far as the vibe and the intensity of the music. Susie Sue would have a really big influence on goth music, but she technically is considered punk and more post-punk than goth, because there's kind of an argument of where post-punk goth is considered to be post-punk. They're kind of one and the same, but I feel like there's a little bit of like a couple year age gap where punk bands kind of ended up towards goth but kind of just stayed in the middle at post-punk, and bands that were trying to go more post-punk just ended up being goth. Anyway,
Yeah, Susie and the Banshees is very like hit or miss for me. Like there are some songs where like I won't like fully skip them. Like I'll be like, okay, I can vibe to this, and there are other songs where I'm just like, I can't. And it also depends how I feel that day. I feel like a fake goth by saying that, but like it I feel like
sometimes you're not in a typo negative mood. Sometimes you're in an NCT mood. And that's
like
okay.
Susie and the Banshees for me, this is gonna sound really odd to say.
Be pretentious.
It sounds like the top 40 version of goth.
It does, doesn't it? We'll get into it.
Yeah.
So, Joy Division, which I had a completely misunderstanding of what Joy Division was. Joy Division also had a heavy influence in goth music. The themes and the sounds are pretty similar overall. And there is a term called proto-goth that was used to describe the more dark-sounding music in the beginning of the post-punk music era. So, proto-goth basically means like before, I don't know, it's hard to explain, it makes sense to me. It's like the baby version of goth.
Yeah, it's like proto-goth, so it's like the prototype of goth. Like it's like this is not quite goth, we're getting there. This is like the alpha version of goth, like where there's still like a ton of bugs in it that you need to work out. And we'll get to like the more beta version of goth here soon.
Yeah. Speaking of which, we're in 1979. Do you know what came out in 1979? Bauhaus.
Oh.
All right, so now we have finally hit the peak of all of these things accumulating: the dark sounds, the droning music, the themes, the ambiance, the flashiness, the being possessed while you're drunk. This is the epitome of goth. A 9-minute song released by Bauhaus. It was the first song they had released, called Bela Lugosi's Dead. This was considered the goth song at the time. It's got the droning sounds, it's got the dark vampiric lyrics, it's got reverb, but Bauhaus hated being called goth at the time. I think they might have considered themselves more post-punk, but this accidentally started a tradition where goth bands would refuse to accept being called goth, which is why I think it's hilarious that I refuse to accept being a goth despite the fact that I am. It's very ironic. It's a very goth thing to do, to be like, I'm not goth. I just love it.
Yeah, that's accurate. My favorite, though, I do really, really love this song. Like, it is
a
very
objectively good song. And you can tell that they put a lot of work into it, and they really sat with it for a minute. Because some songs on this list really just kind of sound like you just kind of threw shit together and didn't listen to it. But this one, it sounds like they really tried to make sure that everything melded together in a way that makes sense. There's never any parts where I felt like something felt out of place when I was listening to this. I unfortunately had to listen to the entire thing, but I have listened to all of Stairway to Heaven multiple times for fun, so I can't really complain about a 9-minute song.
Yeah, like, I actively listen to Sleep Tokens, like 10 to 11 minute songs. But like, this song for me is probably what pushed me to the more put together side of goth, because there's a lot of, like you said before, like there's a lot of goth bands out there now who haven't quite like honed their craft, and this song for me feels like they've honed it. They know what they're doing. Even if they don't call themselves this thing, they are, and they've got it nailed down to a T.
Yeah, it definitely felt very well crafted. I don't have any points on music after this because after Bauhaus kind of released this song, pretty much anything else that kind of fell into this category was goth. So I know that The Cure eventually went towards goth and then they went to pop for some reason, and the band like lost all of its members and gained more members and then went back to goth music and all that stuff. And I know that I had read somewhere that Robert Smith was scared that by a certain age, if he didn't release like his breakthrough album, it was over. Like that was it. And I think that's the whatever the album is that we have the cassette for. I think that was the album.
Yeah, Disintegration. I am slowly working on collecting like old goth cassette tapes, because
Which I all have. I first of all, when you say you're working on collecting them, you mean you're waiting for me to buy them for you for Christmas.
for Christmas
And second
and
of all, I
birthdays.
have to order them from the fucking UK and get them sent over here. So, first of all,
Well,
also
I
I
look
did
at
look
the
into getting you a Walkman, and they're like $600. So you just get to look at them because they're nice
Yikes.
and pretty.
Yeah, I wonder if there's like a cheaper one somewhere. There
I
has
can
to
get you a
be.
cassette walker. I can get you a cassette player. It's just not going to be a Walkman, like
Yeah,
the
cassette
trademark
player.
Walkman.
That's fair.
Anyway,
As
so I
long as
don't
it
have a
plays.
lot. I don't have a lot of like goth bands written down after this, but if anyone is curious what my preferences for goth bands are, you've kind of made me a playlist and I don't know where it falls as far as like goth music, like if it's considered new or old or whatever, but the bands that I have in here, first of all, London After Midnight, absolutely love them. Scary Bitches also love. I'm a hit or miss on Depeche Mode. I do have a Depeche Mode shirt, but I only have like 3 songs on here. Birthday
That's because
Massacre, absolutely love Birthday Massacre.
Depeche Mode for me, it's very hit or miss as well, because they are so all over the place within their own genre. Like they have songs that are like, yes, this is goth, but then they veer off to pop, and then they veer back like way over to rock, and then occasionally hit the mark again with goth, and they're just so all over the place. It's very difficult to place them, in my personal opinion.
Yes. So, just some of the songs on here that I've already liked. I have one song by Sisters of Mercy, so No One Come For Me. The 69 Eyes. I've got London After Midnight. Oh, I have a second song by Sisters of Mercy. There we go. Christian Death I have on here. Vandal Moon. Horror. I want to say Da Vinci, and it's just not. VACUI, or that band is. Typo Negative. We already know I want to fuck that man. Raised in Black, but with a Z. Bloody Dead and Sexy, Boy Harsher, This Cold Night, The Damned, stuff like that. So this is kind of the playlist that basically Psychos just throws songs on here, and I kind of veto them or keep them on here depending on how I feel about them. So whatever you want to say, I have Queens of the Stone Age on here, which I consider rock, but go off, I guess. Whatever you want to say about my musical preferences based off that information, do it what you will.
Yeah, like I have like other playlists, like personal playlists that have certain songs on here. Like I have The Cure, I have Sisters of Mercy, The Frozen Autumn, Lebanon Hanover, The Cocteau Twins, London After Midnight, Mephisto Waltz.
Everyone loves London After Midnight.
It's so good.
It's so good. You don't like Scary Bitches. I love Scary Bitches.
I don't mind Scary Bitches. I actually
love Scary Bitches.
Okay, I like Scary Bitches, but I have to be in a very specific mood for Scary Bitches, if that makes sense.
Lesbian Vampires from Outer Space will forever be the greatest song that's ever been written.
Yeah, I have Rose Garden Funeral Party, which is a blast. Clan of Zymox, I think is how you pronounce that.
Yeah, I have some of them too.
Yeah, Vandal Moon. I have Male Tears. I recently got into Male Tears, and it's so good.
Ooh, you guys sent me that. Okay.
Yeah.
The last little bit that I have here before we get into the main concept of goth is goth in America. So goth music started to pop up into America, but it still had a punk feel to it. It was actually considered to be death rock because of how many similarities there were. Are you yawning or disgusted? Okay, there we go. You're yawning.
Sorry, AEB.
Very good. Goth reappeared in the States in the late 90s. I think this might have been due to the fact that there was a really big goth club that I learned about in New York, which makes a lot of sense because some of the people that I follow who are really big into goth were in New York. And there's also a club called the Bat Cave in London, which I'm offended that you've never told me existed. That was a huge thing too. Goth is very club heavy as far as the culture goes.
It is, but it's not like club heavy in the way that most people think of clubbing. Like it is.
No, goth clubs are very, very different. And also I saw a couple videos because I did actually go on YouTube and look to people who are goth talking about it, but you couldn't just like you didn't just Google goth club. Like you had to like know someone who knew someone who knew where it was, or you just like find flyers for it. Like it was very underground as far as like getting there and stuff like that. Um so goth reappeared in the US in the 90s, and it continued to grow into the late 10s, and now it's kind of evolved into a bunch of other things, but just to put it out there before anyone gets mad at me, emo and goth are not the same thing. Scene is actually born out of emo. Emo was born out of punk, and e-girls and like that e-trend was born out of scene. So they're not the same like in any aspect. So just a heads up before anyone gets mad at me. Okay, so we're going into the concept of goth. Goth is a music based subculture that was born out of the UK in the early 1980s. We've known this. It was centered around music festivals, nightclubs, and organized meetings, mostly in Western Europe. There's an association with a certain aesthetic and fashion. The term comes from the Germanic tribes that invaded the Roman Empire. It was used to describe the architecture that was linked to the Goth tribes, the original ones, and the dark style art that came out during the period of Enlightenment. So when everyone was doing a push towards science and understanding the universe in a scientific aspect, there was a rebellion movement at the time where you were getting a lot of those paintings that had, you know, skeletons and demons and that kind of dark thematic look to it. Think like that one painting, the Ophelia one or whatever, that kind of stuff. It was the counter rebellion gothic thing that was going on at the same time, and that's why that kind of got adopted into goth. We've already done so much into the music that I don't really feel like I need to dip into it again. But as far as goths in the US go, it was very difficult and very expensive to get CDs over from the UK. It was very, very, very difficult. In fact, you had to go to multiple stores just to see if you could find one album. Obviously, I'm in the US. I'm going to be doing a bit more of a US look on it. But since goth was kind of born out of the UK and it took a while for it to spread over here, it was just kind of impossible. So, also, there's no merch for goth bands, which as a K-pop fan is wild. Like K-pop fans, you get an album, you get like 50 of them, you get a world tour, and there's so much shit going on. And then everyone who owns a small business who releases K-pop stuff makes like 50 million different keychains for it. There's customization people who just like alter your light stick. Like, can you imagine having a light stick for The Cure? It'd be crazy. So I can't
It's
find a
just like a
single
bat.
right. I can't find a single London After Midnight, like anything. And what? Anyway, not the point. Um, Also a lot of goth clothes, which we'll get into the fashion in a minute. They were actually sold at fetish stores. It's that kind of dark, the dark lacy kind of look. You would mostly find that in fetish stores, which is unfortunate if you're a child.
Yeah, if you're like under the age of 18 and you're trying to get into this and you're like, I just want the clothes, man. I just want the clothes.
Yeah. So, we have a lot of in goth music itself. There was also a lot of sampling and programming done with computers that would add very unique sounds and synths into the music. So kind of the modern age helped with that a little bit, giving it that, I don't want to say retro feel, but that definitely like computer generated sounds, but like you can tell. You know what I mean? So, the themes of gothic fashion and aesthetic. There was a big punk influence, and that's more considered to be the trad goth kind of look. There's also something called new romantic fashion, which when I looked into it, new romantic was actually considered to be the next wave of goth aesthetic that was born out of punk. It's very, very different. The dressing styles are Victorian and Edwardian, which is more of a different subsect of goth, and it's mostly black attire, dark makeup, and black hair. A lot of goth items and clothing draw influence from B-rate movies, gothic literature, vampire cults, Celtic, Christian, Egyptian, and general pagan mythology and traditions, which is why you'll see a lot of goth people wearing religious iconography and stuff like that. Traditional goths back in the 90s would look for clothing at their stores, since there wasn't really a big box store that you could just go buy gothic style stuff from. It wasn't really a thing at the time. Some people said that they would go and specifically buy slips or lingerie, more like older lingerie, like a slip or like a nightgown, and they would just dye it black. So a lot of classic goth fashion, it was actually really thrifting heavy, and that's kind of a sentiment that I've heard with a lot of older goths, or elder goths as they're called, is that most of what they have are thrifted, and you can't really find something like that kind of just uniquely out in the world being sold as like a mass produced item.
Which, like the thrifting heavy thing has also kind of carried over into like modern day goth culture as well, but it's sort of gotten more annoying in that people just aren't, my personal opinion, as creative with it as they used to be.
I think they don't want to put in the effort to try and like take the collar from this and put it on the shirt of this. Like there's a
Yeah.
lot less wanting to like Frankenstein an outfit together. And there's a lot less willingness to layer. The expectation is that you get a dress and it comes with all of the different layers and everything kind of added into it. And there is a reference later on to like mass produced goth fashion. An elder goth on YouTube had an opinion about it. She's also linked in the resources.
Yeah, like I know that anytime we go to like a thrift store, we're not like, and especially for me, I'm not like looking specifically for dark clothing. I'm looking for stuff that would be willing to dye. Like, oh, if I like the style of this, I just don't like the color of it, I can dye it black. It'll be something that I would feel comfortable wearing once it's dyed that different color. But like, we would go and like we would see like some girls who are more alternative, and they're just have like every dark clothing item in
Dude,
their
literally
carts.
the last 2 times that we went to the thrift store, we saw someone who looks like younger. It's not the same person, but we would see like a girl who looked younger, and she would just buy every single piece of black clothing. Even if it like what she was holding didn't necessarily look goth, it looked kind of basic, but also she wasn't dressed goth. She was dressed more scene. At least from someone who did grow up in the emo and like
Mm-hmm.
scene. Um, you've seen pictures of me as a kid. So,
Yeah. But like
um,
it feels like late, like
it feels like there's an expectation for convenience that just was not a thing back
mhm.
then.
And I think that's kind of what's for me really off about the scene now is like everybody expects it to be sort of uniform. Like there's like hardly any uniqueness now. Like everybody gets the same like 5 things and it
You're actually saying exactly what that other lady said. So we'll get into it. Hold that thought. We'll get into it because you're literally saying exactly what she said. So we'll get to it in a second. So, for people who are interested in dyeing their stuff, I did take this opinion from her. She said that and this was specifically from a YouTuber that I also linked. I don't remember her name. It's Angelica something. She said that they wouldn't use black dye because it would end up looking a weird color. They would actually use red or blues to get a lot of the colors that they liked. And what they would do is they would layer a lot of stuff together. And because everything is layered onto black anyway, it would actually look really good together. Also, for collars and stuff like that, they would go to pet stores, which I actually remember doing as a kid. I would go to pet stores to get collars and like bracelets and stuff like that. And they would get a lot of their accessories from religious stores, like rosaries and stuff like that. Typical fashion for goths looks like black hair with a lot of heavy influences from punk outfits. Jewelry is typically silver, and some things do take it down like the pagan or religious route. You can kind of understand what I'm saying with that. So gothic literature, because this is kind of roping in a lot of stuff. So the genre of gothic literature is a genre of fiction that combines romance and dark themes, and these character kind of portrayals. You'll also find the look of these characters in the period of time that they're from kind of carries over into goth fashion as well. Settings are traditionally castles, gloomy churchyards, claustrophobic monasteries, and lonely mountain roads. I'm thinking very specifically of Dracula with this. Characters consist of cruel parents, sinister priests, courageous victors, helpless heroines, and supernatural figures like demons, vampires, ghosts, and monsters. There are focuses on characters who are ill fated, innocent victims harassed by malicious figures, and characters gradually going insane. it hits a lot of the dark themes that a lot of other things don't really want to talk about, and it takes it to a very dark place, but also it is kind of grounded in reality, which is the unfortunate part.
Yeah, like I'm finally reading Dracula for the first time because I never read it in school. But I did read Frankenstein like several times in school, specifically for school. But it's so much better than what I was anticipating. Like, because I've heard like how bad like some old literature can be, and it's just from that perspective that people don't really sit down and think about what it was, like what was going on when it was written, the sentiment it should have had. It's so wild to me because this is so good. Like, I love this book.
Dracula is objectively a very good book. Gothic art. I didn't do a huge bit on this, but I did mention Ophelia, so that's cool. This focused on mystics, morbid and romantic motifs, erotic artwork, and romantic images of vampires and ghosts. So basically, if you just painted any scene from any Gothic literature onto a canvas, boom, Gothic art. Sexuality. Gothic subculture had a heavy influence with the rebellion of commonplace sexuality. Think the nuclear family, it kind of went against that. Women could escape the submissive role that they were expected to be in by society, and there was a crossover into polyamory, queerness, BDSM, and paganism. I don't know why that was roped into sexuality, but it was. Men were able to dress more androgynous, wear makeup, things like that, and almost reverted backwards as far as how they treated women, where they kind of treated women in that same Victorian courting. So there was a lot of respect put on women with stuff like that. It was very classical, but there was also a lot of modern deviousness when it came to sex and stuff like that, which is not very surprising. So it's just a little scape. Modern day culture. I'm so excited I get to talk about this now. A British sitcom, The It Crowd, featured a recurring goth character named Richmond Avenel, played by Noel Fielding, our favorite boy from the Great British Bake Off.
I love Noel so much.
We will literally kill someone for this man. We love him. Noel said in an interview that he had been goth since about the age 15 and had a series of goth girlfriends, but this was the first time he dabbled in makeup, and he enjoyed that his girlfriends would also dress up with him. This is very cute. Some people consider buying ready-made goth outfits to be semi-mall goth, which mall goth is a whole other fucking situation. Mall goths are actually considered to be the people who really like Marilyn Manson, which is not considered goth at all. I think the people who like Marilyn Manson consider themselves goth, but that is definitely not goth. It is more of whatever the fuck is going on with Marilyn Manson. There's a huge issue with goth and Marilyn Manson. I don't understand it. I mean, I do, but I don't.
Aren't mall goths the goths that like actively try to like
Bite
bark
people and
bite
hiss at people?
Yeah.
Yes. I called them, but here's the thing, what was so weird to me is they're called mall goths. But when I was working at a mall, we called them mall rats. And it's because I worked with elder goths, and elder goths called them mall rats. They don't call them mall goths because they're not goths. So if you hear someone calling a group of like scene kids mall rats, it's a derogatory way of calling them mall goths, and that person's an elder goth, because I didn't know the term mall goth and mall rat were the same thing. I thought mall rats were different. So, but yeah, they like bite people. Shit, it's crazy. So, there is a heavy kind of push on wanting to thrift things and dye things and style things, but buying pre-made clothes, some people have said, just makes everyone kind of look the same, and there's no really uniqueness in the goth culture anymore. New goths in the subculture are considered baby bats, which I have been lovingly referred to as a baby bat many a times. And older goths, goths that were around when it first arose in the 80s, are considered elder goths. There's a lot of subsections of the fashion now, and the fashion trends also kind of cross over, so it's really hard to like say you're one or the other. And in a lot of places, especially now, I've heard a lot of people say that you can be goth just based off of fashion. And while you don't have to listen to the older music or even goth music in general, it is expected that you do just to appreciate it. So I don't know where the divide happened from it being a music based to fashion based subculture, but I still think it is technically a music one just because of how heavy the music wasn't influenced, the fact that goth wouldn't even be a thing if the music hadn't happened. So that's just me.
Yeah, like for me, like you have to listen to like goth music at least a little bit in order to be considered part of the subculture. However, small rant here. Fleetwood Mac is not goth. Thank you. Goodbye.
That's like folk-ish.
It's more classic
I would put
rock.
that with put that with Hozier, but not like too much Hozier. Like they're distant cousins.
No, they started out as blues and they moved into the more classic rock, and they do have that kind of witchy vibe that a lot of like modern day witches go for, but it's specifically classic rock. That was something that my grandfather
It's just like a more
raised me on.
like
It is,
tame classic rock, I think.
yeah. It's very like it's more mellow classic rock, but it's still considered classic rock.
Yeah. Okay. So there does seem to be a trend of each wave of goth being kind of distant from the next wave that comes after it, almost like how generations are kind of like, these generations these days have it so much easier. When I was this or whatever, like there's that kind of distinct like generational divide. It seems to be the same thing in goth, but I think the generations just happen about every decade or so. There is a mentioning that if you do wear religious symbols, especially nowadays, you at least need to know the meaning of the religious symbol before you just start wearing it. So at least there's a little bit more awareness of a cultural appropriation in goth. Not a lot, but enough. This I pulled directly from the thesis. I'm quoting this here. I cannot pronounce this name. Marcia, and I'm not even going to try with her last name. Of the Christian Research Journal defines goth culture as a lifestyle rather than just interests. Goths appreciate what mainstream society finds taboo and unsettling, such as horror and death. According to her, it is a state of mind rather than mere fashion statement. While some Goths love to dress in extreme outfits that will grab attention, others prefer to express themselves through art and poetry. Goths defy stereotypes, even in themselves, and rarely are two Goths the same. The biggest part of defining goth is to start inward, not outward. Most goths have the sense of being disconnected from the mainstream culture and having a strong fascination with things that most would prefer to not think about, such as death. Now we're going to get into all the different types of goths that I could realistically handle, which is like 20. So, these are the different types of goths. So, we have the traditional trad goths, which are the look of post punk. Now, this is entirely fashion based, by the way. So we have the traditional trad goths, or traditional goths as they are called. Then we have cyber goth. Cyber goth, I've actually seen a lot of these. They're pretty cool looking. They have a lot of bright neons mixed into the black. They wear gas masks, goggles. They have dreads, which I don't appreciate. Or they have those like tubes. You know what I'm talking about? The like colored tubes. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I love those. I also see a lot of them wearing very chunky shoes, and they have those big like leg cover puff things, super cool looking. And the sound is more techno goth, and they're commonly the ones that you're gonna find at raves. So it's like EDM goth. Romantic goth, which is not you, is more like romantic period style clothing, but black, and they like it a lot of traditional music. I don't know if that meant traditional goth music or traditional classical music, because then we get into Victorian goths. Now, Victorian goths are different in the sense that they dress like Victorian nobility. They enjoy dark theater and classical music. So we're getting away from the goth music and we're jumping more into just gothic look, but of a certain time period. There's also medieval goth, which is not you. This is influenced.
Not you. Not you. Shut up. Not you.
Sometimes when you put a nail into a hole, shut up. So we have medieval goth, which is influenced by, shocker, the medieval period. They have a love of fantasy, iconography, like dragons and fairies and stuff like that, stuff you'd see at a Ren fair, and they really enjoy folk music. Hozier is goth, in my opinion. Thank you. Here we go. Vampire goth. There you are. This is
That's me. That's actually the more like vampire goth.
accurate.
It's like like the aesthetic I've set out from the beginning to try to have. I just
The very
there's
last
something.
point on this list, I wrote literally me, though. So we'll get to that eventually. Do you want to take a wild guess of which one I categorized as myself?
Oh gosh.
We'll get
I don't.
there.
Yeah, I don't
We'll get
know
there.
yet.
Vampire goth is a subtype of the other threes that come before this, but it specifically has an influence of like vampiric culture. So pretty much Dracula, which, shocker, you're reading Dracula right now. There's also steampunk goth, which I am very well aware of because I actually was in the steampunk community for a little bit, and it's a combination of the Victorian and cyber goth aesthetic, but it leads heavy into the sci-fi, the Zeppelins, stuff like that, you know, the non-existent Hindenburg incident.
No. Oh my god. I'm gonna
Did we
do it.
explain this yet?
No,
We haven't explained it.
I don't think we
So
have.
Psychos and I have a question for each other whenever we're arguing something where it's called, is this your Hindenburg? And basically what it means is this something that is 100% true, but regardless of how much I try to convince you of it, you will never believe me.
So, Mythos does not believe that Zeppelins exist because growing up, they played World of Warcraft a lot.
Whoa. Okay. No. You're already spouting false information. It's not that I did play a lot of World of Warcraft growing up, but it's because I had only ever seen Zeppelins in fantasy settings. I'd never seen Zeppelins or
Oh.
blimps. I think it's a blimp, technically. I had never seen blimps in real life, which is stupid because the Goodyear blimp is like a thing. Like I had a plushie, not a plushie, but I had like a toy of it. But I'm like, oh, it's just a big, funny, fake balloon. It's like a Macy's parade balloon, but
Oh,
no one's in
God.
it. So yeah, I know. Look, I know the hint. You're gonna cover this one day, or I'll cover it one day.
No, I'm gonna cover the Hindenburg incident one day because it's technically a crime, and you're gonna be like, "I'm so glad you decided to tell us a not
fantasy
real,
story.
like a not real story at all," and I'm gonna be like bashing my head against the mic, like.
Literally. All right. So the next thing that we have is cabaret goth or burlesque goth. I'm going to stop at every single one and see if this is what you think I am or not. Cabaret goth or burlesque goth.
I feel like you are slowly getting into. I haven't heard the description yet, but a lot of the music that you do like to listen to does kind of fall into this. So I wonder if it's gonna start like impacting
Horny.
like. Yeah, horny bimbo goth. It's fine.
Yes, if it's not already a thing, Psychos has coined my type of goth as horny bimbo goth, which I really heavily appreciate. It's like,
Do you really? Because I'm terrified
I
that every
do.
time I
I think
say
it's
it,
I
that
think
you're
it's very
gonna
fun and it's very interesting. It definitely does fit like me in kind of the fashion that I go for is like horny bimbo goth. I like it.
Yeah, because every time I say I'm terrified, like, oh god, they're gonna think I'm like slut shaming and being like mean about it. I'm like, no, genuinely, this is like, I think it's very cute. Like, it's a very cute aesthetic for you.
Mm-hmm. So, cabaret goth or burlesque goth has a 50s vibe. Cabaret goths or burlesque goths typically want to be seen as sexual, but like tastefully sexual. Next, we have fetish goth.
No.
This leads more towards the BDS side of things. That's literally all I wrote down because that's all you need to know. Tribal goth or belly dancer goth.
I feel like that's like, how do I phrase this? I feel like that's more
Let me
appropriation-y.
explain it before
Okay.
you say one thing or the other. So, tribal goths or belly dancer goths are influenced by classical belly dancing outfits. They use bones and gems to decorate their outfits, and they also have heavy Egyptian and Arabian themes. Just feels racist somehow.
Like, if it feels very appropriation-y if the wrong people are doing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Next, we have gothabilly, which is a mixture of rock and hillbilly with goth. So it's rockabilly, but goth, which just makes sense. It's like pinup, but goth, and it looks really good on the people who do it. I could never, but everyone who does it is beautiful. Next, we have pastel goth.
I've heard of pastel goth, and
I saw it at the Michaels Halloween thing. They had a pastel goth section. I don't like pastel goth
I
personally.
don't either. Like, I understand, like, at one point you want to, like, listen to, like, you want to listen to dark music, but you don't want your, like, entire existence to be dark almost. So you try to, like, lighten it with your outfits, but it just feels very bubblegum poppy goth
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah.
It doesn't ring as, like,
Yeah. It definitely feels more like scene almost. Next, we have white goth, which I'd never heard of before, and it's basically any of these types of goth, but just sub where the black goes for white. It's literally just the opposite. You see it a lot more in the romantic or Victorian styles, where instead of wearing all black, they were all white, and it's supposed to give the illusion of a ghost or like a really pale effect.
interesting.
Next,
I could never.
I didn't want to leave this out at all, so I did add this in. We have Japanese goth styles because obviously Japanese fashion is going to have an influence somewhere. So J goths are split into two types of goth, both of which I'm very aware of. So we have visual K and gothic Lolita. This is kind of that, like, I don't want to say punk, but kind of like a retro looking J fashion, but make it dark. I would also consider Gothic Lolita to be more Lolita than Gothic in itself. I'm not going to get into the entire history of Lolita fashion or the media, whatever Lolita. It's completely different. But there's that. And then there's casual goth.
You. Well, technically both of us right now, but
So that's the thing. So casual goth is actually, it's really funny that this is considered to be it, but casual goth is actually considered to be what other goths will wear when they're not outside, because obviously people aren't going to dress like this all the time, and 90% of the time goths dressed in casual goth fashion, which is really just casual clothes, t-shirts, black stuff like that, just comfy clothes. I'm really surprised that this was actually added in as a thing, because that makes absolutely no sense to me, but there we go. So, all right, this is the dark thing. We're at the
okay.
dark part.
Before we jump into the dark part real quick, I feel like casual goth is what we are like 99.9% of the time, and then anytime we go out, we dress more of the
Yeah.
subsection that we really want to be.
I agree.
But it's like very specific, like days that we dress like that. It's not even like going
it takes
out
too much
for-
energy, man.
It takes so much time.
Okay. Columbine.
I have words. I am going to do like a mini series on Columbine. Not now, probably like next year or the year after, depending on just when we have time to do it, just because of how much information there is about it.
Now, Columbine, I know very little about this outside of what Psychos has lovingly ranted to me about.
It
nope,
makes me
turn
so
your mic
angry.
off.
Okay.
We're gonna be here for 40 hours if I don't stop you right there. Columbine was a school shooting that took place in 1999 at Columbine High School. The shooters were Eric Harris and Dylan
Klebold.
Thank you. In the weeks following the shooting, the media painted these shooters as goths and that they were part of a goth cult. This led to a sort of Red Scare, but within the goth subculture. The two boys were thought to be part of a group called the Trenchcoat Mafia, which makes the Alphabet Mafia whole thing make me uncomfortable now, an informal club in the school. This was later proven false. There was actually no factual evidence to provide that they were goth, and there was another school shooting that took place where the shooter proclaimed himself as goth, but the goth community in the area said this dude, one, is not goth, and two, he was literally a metalhead, like a full like death rock metalhead, and it was just, yeah. So there, it's very easy to pin these kind of wearing darker clothing, doing dark things, people who do terrible things. It's really easy to pin them as goth, but they are completely different subsections. I also want to add in here really quickly that there was a study done about people who, trigger warning for SH, right? Yeah. There was a study done about people who self-harm who were in the goth community, and while it was said that over 60% of the people did self-harm, they did not self-harm while they were in the subculture. It was before they had found the subculture, when they felt like they had no kind of escape or place of community, and once they got into the subculture and found that community within the the goth culture, they felt a lot more comfortable and they were a lot more accepted, and they felt like they were getting better, and they were. So just adding that in there. I have funny YouTube comments now, and then we'll be done
With your section.
with my section. So funny YouTube comments. This was from Trash Theory, the before Bauhaus How Goth Became Goth. This comment says, I love Bela Lugosi's Dead because I can start the song, do the dishes, walk the dog, and pick out an outfit before the song even starts.
I mean, that's so accurate.
Which is accurate. Another comment says, I love how every how genre became genre mentions the Velvet Underground.
I feel like the Velvet I feel like the Velvet Underground has like their fingers in like almost every genre. Like
Every pie has felt the touch of the Velvet Underground. Another man, and if this is not a hoodie, this is merch. We are totally releasing this as merch. I don't know if we can take this, but the comment said, Goth is dead. ... undead, 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 which is a reference to Bela Lugosi's dead.
I love that.
This I thought was very interesting to point out. This did not have a lot of interaction on it, but I wanted to mention this just in case I might have missed something. It says they missed a few bands from the UK that contributed to the early movement: Killing Joke, Sex Bang Children, Southern Death Cult, later The Cult, and The Specimen. In fact, back in the day there were dozens, but these were the most notable that were still not as well known outside of the UK. So, for any UK people that are going to throw me out of a 2-story window because that's a reference to next episode, because of me not mentioning, you look so shocked, me not mentioning the UK bands. There you go. Angry Bob on the Bauhaus video decided to say it for me.
Speaking of Southern Death Cult, and then later on just the Cult, as he mentioned, we've actually listened to a few of their songs together.
We
actually
have?
Yeah.
Did I like it?
Yeah, you kind of did. It was like very...
song?
I don't remember, honestly. Like, it was like one of those things where we were just looking at like different like goth bands, and then we found this one and we started listening to a couple of their songs.
So that is my section on the history of goth culture.
Woo!
Did you
And
enjoy it? Did you learn? Did you have fun? I feel like I learned a lot of information, but also because I'm so into the goth scene, none of this was really crazy new to me.
I mean, honestly, same. Like, this was stuff like I was slowly like picking up on as like I maneuvered, like especially after I turned 18 and really started diving into the kind of stuff that I wanted to do. Like with my look and everything else, these were just kind of things that I picked up on, but like having them all come together in like one cohesive unit of information makes more sense to me. And I just think it's really cool though.
It definitely was an interesting thing to research. I don't want to say I didn't realize how music heavy it was, but it's really interesting how much of a divide there is between how modern goths are kind of, and I say modern goths as like goth people who have become goth in the last like 10 years, really don't have such a lean in the music. And then you have these people who are like ultra freaking like elitist about it, which makes me wonder if there's a push to be elitist about it to almost prove to elder goths that you have the right to be here, when I don't think elder goths are even giving a shit at that point, because most elder goths are in their like 60s now.
Yeah, from what I've seen, most elder goths don't care as long as you listen to the music like occasionally. Like, I've heard people say like even if you listen to just one goth song on repeat and like it's mixed in with like other music, you're still technically goth because you are still consuming something that's goth.
Welcome back. We took a break to eat lunch.
Yeah, we took a break to eat and now we're back. And
because unfortunately I think this is going to be like 4 hours long.
Not
on y'all's end, but on our end, it's going to be like 4 hours long.
Yeah. I'm going to try to make it not be 4 hours, but we'll see.
Just a heads up for next week. Next week is going to be a 2-parter. And
on both ends.
It's going to be long episodes. So just a heads up, next week might be like 4 hours post editing.
Yeah, we'll see. It ultimately depends on how we record it and run it.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty. So, thank you for teaching us about goth subcultures. I got a thumbs up. And
you're welcome.
Which is very important because my case is very well known in terms of the goth community.
Mm-hmm.
Today, I'm going to be talking about the attack and death of Sophie Lancaster.
Just a heads up for everyone, I do actually know this case. We've watched some videos on it before, so I do actually have a rough idea of what happens this time. I'm just gonna be mad.
Yeah. So, if you could point out one thing that's unique for solely you, what would it be?
What do you mean?
Like, if somebody were to describe you at, like, for instance, like murder documentary style.
Asshole.
What is the one thing that would be unique about you that stands out to people?
I'm an asshole.
Is that really going to be your response?
I don't know. Why don't you tell me?
I'm not going to say that you light up a room because that's like immediate, like...
I don't light up a room. I am the life of the party though, but I hate parties. But I am a very energetic person.
Yeah, you do. Like, I would say that you are very energetic. You do care very deeply about the people in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And
You're
that
also very caring, but you're like motherly caring. Like,
I
I
am, but
want to put my head on your boobs and like cry.
I don't know how to react to that. I'm sorry. But
Are you leaving that in?
honestly, I might. So everybody knows how depraved you really are. I'm joking. Would that thing that makes you so special be worth dying over? If somebody told you you cannot behave like this anymore, you cannot do this thing anymore, otherwise you'll die.
To me, if we're making the personality point be that I'm very caring of the people in my life, and I'm a very loyal person. I'm
Mhm.
very protective.
Like if somebody told you that if you stayed loyal to this one person, like staying loyal to this one person would get you killed one day, would you still be loyal to that person?
Yes.
Okay.
If the person's you. Absolutely.
Would you carry on with my little mini questionnaire? Would you own that part of you with pride, or would you try to tuck that away because
Nope.
you
Absolutely.
now okay.
I would wear that like a badge of honor.
Yeah. For a lot of people, it's a no-brainer. Why live at all if you can't live as your most authentic self? Sophie Lancaster wore her differences with pride and a kind heart, and unfortunately, not everybody around her was as gentle with it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my intro.
I like it. It's
I wanted,
different.
yeah, I'm trying to like branch out a little bit more with my intros.
Mm-hmm. I like it.
Mini rant before I get started. Now, I'm going to top this off by saying if this was purposely done by the family, okay, I respect that decision. However, if it was not purposely done by the family, why? Why is the most important thing that this girl has done in her life? Why is it dying? Because I have found very little information about who she was before everything. Like, there's more information out there about the night of the attack, the trial, and how her life ended and everything that came after. But there is next to nothing about who she was, what she did, what she was planning on doing with her life beforehand. I was able to locate some information, not as super detailed as I would typically like to be when it comes to stuff like this. And almost all of my information I have gained from the video that Eleanor Neal did on this.
She's great, by the way.
Yeah. I highly enjoy her videos. I highly recommend her videos. But most of my information about her prior to the attack is from that video.
So, question really fast. I lost my sock. What? She's not one of those true crime people that's been like called out recently, right? She's a good one. She's a good bean.
I think she might be a good bean.
She's a great bean.
Yeah, she used to do her makeup and talk about true crime at the same time, but then she just swerved over to just true crime, and she now has this fun segment that she does on Fridays where she's not talking specifically about true crime cases, but just like creepy stuff. Like I think one day she talked about the exploitation of "I see your sock. It's over by the mirror. You threw it." I'm sorry. But I know she recently has started like a new series on Fridays where she'll talk about more creepy stuff, not necessarily true crimey based, but she talked about like the exploitation of women in Hollywood one episode, and then another episode she talked about the derailing of a roller coaster. Like she is sort of
She's
expanding.
branching out.
She's branching out. Anyway, so her video is where I get most of my information for the beginning of her life. I've also used the Sophie Lancaster Foundation's page for a more more timeline reasons, and then I've just dived into a lot of the news articles that was happening as things were going on. It was very wild to be able to see the different articles come out because you can like in Google, you can put the news articles in order, like most recent, and then if you just scroll all the way back, you can like see the information as it comes out. It was very interesting. Sophie Lancaster was born on November 26th, 1986, to Sylvia and John Lancaster, who had a son named Adam before Sophie.
Her birthday's soon. When does this episode come out?
This episode will come out
Right before her birthday?
right before her birthday.
The 24th? Her birthday is Sunday then.
Yeah, her birthday's 26th. That was not planned.
Happy early birthday.
Happy early birthday. That was not planned
No.
at all.
I just happened to know it was November this time.
Yeah. Alrighty. So she has an older brother named Adam. I could not find when he was born, but he's
Named
like
Adam?
Adam.
They said Nadam.
No, Adam. He was a couple years older than her. So Sylvia is a trooper mom throughout this entire thing, and like she is genuinely so amazing for the work that she's done after the death of her daughter. But she also absolutely adored Sophie. Like her and Sophie were very close. Growing up, Sophie kept to herself mostly, more of a book person than a people person, which I feel like a lot of people can relate to.
Me too, honestly.
I know I was that kind of kid. And while to bring that up again, there's not a whole lot about her early life due to the fact that she's pretty much known for dying, and that's very upsetting to me because people are more than the worst things that's ever happened to them. And the fact that she's been reduced to, oh, the girl who died because she was goth is very sickening to me.
It feels like a waste of human life.
It
And
does.
not in the sense like she was a waste of space. Like, it's a waste of how complex and important like life as an experience is.
Yeah, and I understand that had it been somebody else, had it been somebody who didn't have a mother who loved them as much as Sylvia loved Sophie, if it was somebody who just didn't have the time and energy to devote to this, a lot of the after effects of this happening would not have happened. Like there would not be the same protections, and it's really a catch-22 where obviously you never want somebody to die, but if that person hadn't died, would we still have these same after effects?
Mm-hmm.
And that is a very difficult position to be in. Continuing on, Sophie was very kind and caring. She absolutely adored her mother, like I mentioned before. They had a very strong bond, and often Sophie would mention that she just wanted to be like her mom growing up. Sylvia worked as a youth worker, which, according to Indeed, is somebody who just works with youth to build up certain life skills outside of just schoolwork. They can set up programs, events, and different things to just engage children and the young adults in the community. Sophie wanted to help people just like her mother did when she grew up.
That's so sweet.
Yeah, so Sylvia already had that. I will bounce back and forth between Sylvia and Sylvie. Sylvie was what she's
And
more
this is the
commonly known
mother,
as. This is the
Sylvia.
mother. Yeah,
Okay.
Sylvia. But I'm gonna refer to her as Sylvie from now on because that's how she is for the rest of my notes. Sylvie already had the background in community work and in youth work that would help her later on after her daughter died.
Mm-hmm.
Which is another thing to point out is like she's already has this background in things. So had it been anybody else, would they still have had the necessary know-how to go about starting the change? And it's something that I find myself, I keep like going back over these notes, I find myself keep asking that question, like, did it have to be her? And if it did, are these the reasons why? It's a really weird position. It's a really weird headspace. As Sophie grew up, she grew more into her personality. She cracked jokes a lot more. She was a lot snarkier. Like she was very quick-witted. She wasn't snarky as in mean snarky, but she could dish it out and take it. She was back and forth with close friends and family. But if you were not inside her tight inner circle that she accumulated for herself, you wouldn't be able to see this part of her. She was still very self-conscious.
She was just a little witty.
Yeah. When Sophie hit her mid to late teens, she fell into the world of punk rock, and there she literally blossomed. She fell in love with the community, she fell in love with the music. She fell in love with like the outfits, and this is where a lot of people kind of get confused. She started experimenting with her hair, like her appearance around this time as well. Like she was dyeing her hair, she had dreadlocks, she got some pierces and started wearing more dark and baggy clothes. I would personally put her look to be almost not necessarily cyber goth.
But that kind of like it is very like punk, like cyber.
Yeah.
I don't want to say cyberpunk because it's a whole different thing, but it is more punk in my personal opinion.
Yeah, she was definitely more in the punk scene at this point in time. I don't there wasn't a really like set timeline for when she go like if she ever went goth, like full goth. It just seemed like she was just more into the punk side of things and maybe post punk. Not quite goth, but like
In that
goth
little
adjacent.
gray, yeah, in that little
Yeah.
gray area between punk and goth, I think.
Yeah. Finding this niche actually really helped Sophie find her voice, and that was instrumental in finding the parts of her strength that she wasn't really able to find within herself before. Her mom was actually very supportive of this, and because there's nothing she wouldn't do for her daughter. If her daughter decided that she wanted to go down this route with her look and with this subculture, she would support her 1,000%. And that is very rare, I feel like, now.
It is really rare, and it's definitely not a common thing to find in any alternative communities. It's kind of a stereotype that, like, oh, you're in an alternative community, you must not get along with, like, your parents or whatever. It really is a weird stereotype, but it is a little true. And so for her to have that support system, it's honestly great, but it also is just a little bit more tragic given that like it's such an uncommon thing to have and it
Hmm.
was given, I mean, rightfully so to someone who really desperately needed it, it seems, but also like it's just unfortunate that it was such a good all-around family that this had to happen to, you know?
Yeah, like it's harder to really put into words just how much of a tragedy this really was on at like every level. So it just I'm happy that while Sophie was still alive, she had an awesome support system.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure she probably felt that too.
I'm sure she did. Her and her mother were very close.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was I'm honestly a little jealous, but I'm happy that she did have that support system there. Because, of course, not everybody was super accepting, which is something we see kind of everywhere. But Sophie always kind of let the bullying roll off her back like it was nothing. She was fully immersing herself in the punk rock and goth subcultures and really grew into herself at this point in time. Like, so she was kind of like exploring the goth subcultures, but her look was definitely more punky, if that makes sense. And of course, while she grew into herself, she went out and started to make new friends, and she was eventually introduced to a boy named Robert Maltby, and the two hit it off almost immediately. While Robert Maltby was about a year older than Sophie, the two were practically the same person. Like
Do
they
we
both,
know around what age she was when they met?
um, just mid to late teens.
Yeah, fair.
Sophie's family like absolutely adored Robert and brought him into their like family almost immediately.
Mm-hmm.
They provided a safe space for Robert, who had stumbled upon like the goth punk scene as a way to express himself when quote unquote normie culture kind of felt too oppressive
I
for him.
love the term normie, by the way. I absolutely adore it. I don't know why. It's a great term. I love calling people normies.
Yeah.
Is that terrible of me to do? Probably. Do I care? No.
At some point during this time they started dating, which is kind of important, especially later
Mm-hmm.
on.
Yeah. This I do know. Like I said, I already know this case, so.
Yeah, so the two did start dating at some point, but whenever they were together, they were very quick to laugh off or straight up just ignore the strange looks or comments they got in public at like whenever they were spending time together in the beginning.
What a cute couple. Like what a healthy like little like these losers. Like they don't get it. Like I just love that. Like they don't let it get to them that much. That's really sweet.
I think so too. Because to them, and like most people who are, in my opinion, sane and have at least a little bit of empathy, making fun of somebody for how they look or how they dress is incredibly immature.
It really is. And I also, like, I'm gonna go on a side tangent here real fast. I hate this, like, the thing that I hate more than anything else. Like, I understand, like, kids being bullies because they're, like, young and stupid and they don't understand things. But I hate when adults behave like big children. Like, they bully, and especially like when they do that to like teenagers and like kids, like, you're a whole ass adult. And I'm not sitting here saying, like, if you are a child and you harass someone on Twitter and then they hurt, like, tell you that you're being an idiot, and they're like, you're arguing with a child, like, you're in the wrong here. But when you're an adult, like a full normie adult, and you like shit on people for being alternative in any way, you're just acting like a child, and it's not cute. You're being petty, and I hate petty culture. I hate petty culture because it's excusing bullying by claiming girl boss, is the best way I can explain it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like there are ways to be petty in a, like
Because
for
here's the
instance,
thing,
like petty revenge
petty and
is,
malicious compliance are not the same thing.
yeah.
Petty is being a bully, it's being mean, it's being ridiculous, and then being like, oh, well, it's okay. I'm just a little petty. It just makes me quirky. It's like, no, because your version of petty is textbook definition bullying. And I understand everyone's like, oh my god, like bullying, like that's such a childish thing. Like, okay, fine. If you don't want to use the word bullying, then I'll call it what it actually is. It's harassment. You are going out of your way to harass someone. It is verbal assault by the definition of assault. It is verbal assault. It is morally wrong. And not only do you look like a dumbass, but then you're trying to justify you being a dumbass by saying it's okay, it's part of what makes me quirky and cute, but you're actually just a terrible person.
Yeah, fully agree. Um,
And this is to people who don't deserve it. Like, if someone cheats on you and you're petty back, like, I feel like that's a different justification.
yeah.
If you're being petty to someone who has, like, morally wronged you, like, that's a different situation. But if you've just woken up one day and decided to just be a petty asshole to someone who literally is not infringing on your existence, stop eating your microphone, on your existence at all, and this is how you choose to carry yourself, you need to go back to preschool. Like, respectfully, I don't think people should be behaving this way. And if you are above the age of 25 and acting like a petty little child, you do not have a place in civilization, to me as a person. But I am a very, very, very harsh person. I'm not petty. I'm just harsh when it comes to the reality of, if I don't like someone, I will tell you if you ask.
Yeah, that's very fair. I fully agree. But going back to my case, to Robert and Sophie, they didn't really see, they saw the humor in it. They're like, why would we care? Why would we entertain these people's judgments when the two of them had spent so long trying to find something that made them feel okay, something that made them feel like they belonged. And once they found it, who cares if this is what's getting them like weird stares in public? Like, I feel like they kind of felt sorry for these people who were like judging them, like, oh, like, I personally interpreted it as, oh, these people probably have never had that sense of community before, where they feel so obligated to appear and act normal that whenever they see two people genuinely enjoying their lives and how, like, dressing how they want to, that it just feel like that weird, trying to figure out how to phrase this, you know what I'm trying to say though?
Yeah, I know what you're trying to say.
Like, it feels so weird that somebody gets so offended whenever you see somebody just living their life.
What's that one thing that I saw on TikTok where a lady was like, if a doll upsets you and offends you that much,
I think you're being like a little too like sensitive, or like if this one image like just completely shakes the foundation of your faith, then your faith must be not that fucking strong, you know, like
Yeah.
because look, I'm not it's that one song we listen to, not all Christians, I'm not saying all religious people get this uptight, but the people that do, 9 times out of 10, it's like when someone's cheating on you, and this is personal experience that I've had, where someone's cheating on you and then they start accusing you of cheating, but you're not cheating, but they're like projecting. It's like, "Oh, you must be doing something terribly and morally wrong because I would be, or I am," you know? Like they're but almost assuming that everyone else is also just as bad as they are to justify why what they're doing is okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and
It's like when people are racist and then assume everyone else around them is going to agree. It's like,
yeah,
no, you're in the wrong here.
absolutely in the wrong. Around this time, this is the early 2000s, though, which would be just after, from an American standpoint, this is just after Columbine, but that kind of like did hit like international news almost.
Yeah.
And by that point, there was like rising violence against the alternative subcultures, and there was a lot of people wanted everybody to fit in and conform. It wasn't like you have to have like certain things in order to fit in, and whenever that kind of society is formed, it hurts a lot of people like Sophie and Robert, where conformity doesn't help them express the things that they're feeling, the things that they're thinking, what's going on in their brain. It's very harmful as a whole in any context. So that's kind of also important to keep in mind as we keep going. Unfortunately, due to rising violence in the area, both against like goth and alternative kids and just random people in general, they couldn't laugh it off much longer. Like it was getting really bad. They would be physically attacked more often than once. Like they were used to hearing like the comments and the weird stares, but they would often they would get like physically pushed and hit at random points in time. And they just walked away. They didn't engage. They didn't react. They just walked away. Because if they fought back, they thought that it would be so much worse.
Yeah, which is really unfortunate because you hear that a lot from like any minority group, is like if someone hits you and you hit him back, then you're just exactly what he thinks that you are. And that's a really hard situation to be in because you're almost having to force yourself to take the abuse or risk being the reason why the abuse is justified.
Yeah, like they would like take everything that's happened to them like in one day. Like they would be hit, they would be kicked, they would be like spit at, and they would take all of it and like internalize it until they could get home or to a safe place like where like with their friends or something, and then they would just let everything out. And unfortunately, neither one of their families had any idea what was going on. Like they knew about like the weird stares and the comments, but they had no idea it had gotten physical. They had no idea that their children were regularly being beaten up and attacked on the regular. And that's like a very heartbreaking thing for, I think, for a parent, especially one that loves their kid like as much as Sylvie loved Sophie.
So she had no idea that any of this was going on, I'm assuming, until after the fact? Or
Yes,
she didn't find out until, like, later on before the attack happened that this was a thing?
I think she didn't find out until after the attack happened.
That's terrible.
But Eleanor Neal included a statistic in her video about this case that I also felt necessary to include. But 7 in 10 people who were members of an alternative subculture had been assaulted or harassed just because they were part of this subculture.
Have you ever been harassed?
Not for being...
Well, both of us are in,
Yeah.
I'm not going to specify what it is, but both of us are in a creative community. Have you?
Yeah.
I mean, I know I've definitely been treated poorly for
being like that?
I've been harassed for being LGBTQ plus. At one of my jobs that was in food service, I would regularly have drinks and things thrown at me simply because I had a pin on me that stated my pronouns. And if I went to any like pride events, I would have to almost always hide my identity because most of the class I was in classes with people who very loudly and proudly did not support this, and if they found out that I was going to these things, I would have been made a target. But as far as that creative community goes, I have never been like threatened with violence. I have been sexually harassed, but never threatened with violence or been like people gotten violent with me like they have whenever they found out I was part of the LGBTQ plus community.
Why do so many people sexually harass the people that they consider to be weird
I don't know.
and other? Like, that makes no sense to me. Okay, we need to stay on track. Sorry.
Yeah, going back to the fact that 7 out of 10 people were assaulted or harassed just because they were part of this alternate subculture is very alarming to me. And this was like back in, I want to say, I forgot to include the date on this study, but I think it was like back in 2009 or 2010 whenever that study was conducted. So it is still kind of old. We don't know, there wasn't a more recent study that I found that could like update that, but that is still very alarming to me. Once the school year of 2006 started back up, it became apparent to the couple that they wanted to do separate things with their lives, but like they wanted to do things together. Robert was going into university for an
Good
art
old
degree.
uni.
Yeah, he was going to uni in Manchester for an art degree, and Sophie wanted to take a gap year before she pursued a English degree.
Ooh, fancy.
So like Robert's off getting his art degree, and Sophie kind of followed him to Manchester to like stay with him, but she was just going to take a year to chill out after high school, just to like get her shit together, I guess, before going back to school. Which I mean, honestly, fair. You've been to school for like 12, 13 years at this point. You kind of want a break before you dive back in for another 4 years. They moved to Manchester, and up until 2007, they were genuinely happy. Robert was making excellent strides in his art, and Sophie was his main muse for his art. They were hung out with friends, they went to concerts, they were just living.
It's really cute. I'm really sad for what's about to come. Can we just end it here? And nothing bad ever happened. And
They
she went on to write amazing novels, and her boyfriend ended up being a beautiful painter. He was the next Vincent van Gogh. Done.
I'm sorry.
I can't have anything good in this goddamn household, can I?
No.
What the fuck?
On Friday, August 10th, 2007, Sophie and Robert went to a gathering hosted by a mutual friend named Jonathan. The people were drinking, but nobody got like super drunk or rowdy. It was just like a bunch of college alternative kids getting together and hanging out. After a few drinks, closer to midnight, Robert and Sophie decided to head back to their flat. A bit tipsy, but they were also really happy. They stopped at a corner shop and picked up some cigarettes and more alcohol.
Which I want to point out really fast, tipsy is not like, oh, I can't walk, I'm so drunk. Like, I think people don't understand that, like, tipsy is not that, like, inebriated.
Tipsy is like buzzed. You're feeling good, you're
Yeah.
feeling happy.
You're just like, I'm aware of the fact that I am drinking and I'm happy, but I'm not like,
You're starting to like feel it a little bit, but it's not like really inhibiting anything. You're just like,
yeah, you're
warm.
aware.
They stopped at a corner shop and picked up some cigarettes and more alcohol. Heading out of the shop, they began to head back to their flat. Once they left, they met a group of drunk teenage girls who absolutely like adored Sophie and how she looked and dressed. Like, have you ever met like a group of like drunk girls who are like,
Drunk white girls in a bathroom are like the greatest gift to this planet. Like, I love like really supportive drunk girls. They're super sweet. I don't meet them often, but when I do, I love them. They're so nice.
Yeah, they're like absolutely like God's gift
It's
to mankind.
peak girlhood. It's
It
like
really is.
unadulterated like girlhood. I love it.
This group actually ended up walking with Robert and Sophie for a little bit, and they ended up splitting up once they got to Stubby Lee Park, which is a shortcut they often took to get home, just because there were like other like roadways around that was like far more dangerous than just cutting through the park. And especially at night, you're a little tipsy, you've had alcohol, you kind of don't want to risk it.
See, what's weird is because of where I grew up, I was always told to never go through a park at night. Like, and that might just be because of where I was raised, but like cutting through any kind of wooded area is like a no-go. Like if you have to walk somewhere, you walk on a street, you walk where it's well lit. Like you do not go into a park at night ever, because you will never come out the other end. Like that was drilled into me as a kid.
Yeah, it's a little bit too on the nose.
I know, and I realized it when I said it, but like genuinely that was like a thing that I was told, is like you do not go in, you don't go out at night, you don't go into the woods at night. But to be fair, like, you know, we were kind of raised, like you and I both were kind of raised in like the mountains, raised by like mountain-ish people.
Yeah,
So
you
you
don't.
just don't go out at night. And it's not really that it's like, yeah, there's animals and it's dangerous, but like there are people out in those woods and you don't know who they are, you don't know what they are. Like supernatural shit aside, like there sometimes you just don't go out in the woods at night, and it's for your own good that you don't want to know what's out there, because it might be human, it might not be human, it's not worth trying to find out.
Yeah. Once they split up from the group and started into Sibley Park, it was about 1 a.m. on August 11th. Once they got to the entrance of the park, they noticed a group of boys who they immediately clock as people who would start harassing them. Unfortunately, they believed that this route would still be safer than going the long way home, and this belief would have awful consequences. As Sophie and Robert passed the boys with their heads down trying to get home, the boys started shouting at them, calling them names like emo, goth, weirdo, freak, and mosher, which was like mosh pit type,
Yeah.
which was very common at the time. They ignored this group of boys, believing if they just didn't react, kept on going, head down, the group would get bored and move on. It worked for them before, so they didn't really see why it wouldn't work for them now. After about 10 minutes of this verbal abuse, the couple and the group gets to an area of the park that's like fully a skating park, so more concrete than other parts of the like rest of the park.
These kids were at it for 10 minutes?
For 10 full minutes.
Was no one else in the park?
There were other people in the park. There were other witnesses in the park. We'll get to that later.
Oh, and they just didn't fucking do anything. Incredible.
Yeah, unfortunately.
What shitheads. I blame every single person that was in that park that didn't say anything for this.
I mean, at that point in time, it's a group of teenage boys. They are rowdy as shit. And everybody else is like in the area is kind of is also a kid. So you have this group of kids who have already established themselves to be these bullies, these jerks, these assholes, and they're specifically going after the people who look very different. But if you say something, they can turn against you.
See, this is why I have been okay with the fact that I've kind of set myself up as a person who's just a straight up asshole.
Mhm.
Because if someone did that shit, I would beat the shit out of a motherfucker. And that's just me. They're gonna automatically assume that I'm a terrible person anyway. I might as well beat the shit out of them. You know, you know what I mean? And that's never a good way to approach a situation. But if you go into a situation automatically assuming that I'm gonna be an asshole, I'll just be an asshole, because I'm not gonna convince you otherwise. If that's how you've already walked into this conversation, I'll just beat the shit out of you. It's fine.
Yeah, and that's fair. But at this point on
She's
time,
very different than me. They are very different than me. I have very different opinions, though. I'm a very different person.
yeah, they were looking out for their own well-being, and I can never really fault somebody for that, especially
fair.
especially given what happens to these people. If these people can do this to them, imagine what could have happened to these people had they spoken up.
Okay, but if you have how many boys?
It is a group of 5, I believe.
Okay, if you have 5 kids and enough people, this genuinely is just that whatever bystander bias, whatever it's called, where it's like if no one else says something, then I'm not gonna say something, or assuming someone else is gonna say something. But here's the thing: if there are 20 people in this park, let's say, right, over the course of 10 minutes walking, I'm assuming through a rather large park, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
Any point in time in the city that I grew up in, you walk through a park at night, which you shouldn't be doing, you will pass bare minimum at least 15 people. If all 15 of those people got their head out of their ass, sorry, I centered myself by accident. If all of those 15 people got their head out of their ass and said something, then that's 5 teenage boys versus 15 people. Bare minimum, 2 of them are adults out at night because adults are weird. That's 5 kids against 15 people. This is the early 2000s, right? So I'm assuming someone had a really early version of a cell phone on them, right?
Yeah. We'll get into that later.
Like, if I swear to God, like, this is the shit that drives me crazy. I promise you, there is not a single situation in life where you will ever be faulted for saying something when it looks like someone is in trouble or needs help. And if you don't say something, no one else is going to say something. And if everyone assumes that no one else is going to step in and do something, then enough people will do something about it. Like, it really just pisses me off.
And that's very fair. Nobody says anything while the verbal harassment is going on, but it's also one of those things where Sophie and Robert had been physically harassed on the streets in broad daylight before, and according to my research, nobody ever said anything. They just had to walk away. Nobody
Then
ever
all
did
of those
anything.
people, all of those bystanders are cowardly little bitches, and respectfully, I hope they burn. Like, and here's the thing: I know that's really, really harsh. I know that is extremely harsh. But if our kid was out at night and someone with the audacity to call themselves a parent ever witnessed our kid getting harassed out on the streets and didn't do anything about it, I will, and for legal reasons, this is a joke, I would genuinely beat that person to death. Because if I was out at night and I saw someone getting harassed and I have the audacity to call myself a parent and I don't step in to do something, then I am not worthy of being a parent, because you're not just a parent to your kid, you're a parent to everyone's kid. You take care of each other. And it drives me crazy that that is not a thing that happens anymore. People don't look out for each other. It really is just such a distant fucking world that we live in, and it pisses me the fuck off.
Yeah.
That's my rant. Sorry. I get really,
yeah.
really angry.
Once it does get physical, somebody does call the British equivalent of 911.
119.
119.
It is 119.
Okay. I didn't know that.
I saw a joke recently on TikTok about a British person who was like, "Oh, it's November 9th. Sorry, Americans, that thing happened to you." And the people were like, what are you talking about? And they were
No,
like,
no, no.
"Oh, the
Oh,
thing."
no, it's no. I think British one is 999.
Is it 999?
I
Oh, you
think
got
so.
it backwards. I think 119, it's somewhere. 119 is something somewhere. 119 emergency number. Where is that? Oh, that's in Asia. It's in parts of Asia and Jamaica.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Okay. Yeah. So
Oh, it's Japan. It's Japan. That's probably why I know it.
we need to
Move on. Sorry.
stop stalling. At one point, once they get to the skate park portion of the actual park, one member of the group yells, "He," referring to Robert, "is a mosher. Hit him." And somebody did, fully punching Robert in the face. And it took both Robert and Sophie by surprise. And whether from nervousness or shock, Robert laughed.
I have known people who laugh in really stressful situations because they don't know how else to respond. Like, it's an unnatural response for them. They just start laughing.
Yeah, and unfortunately, this pissed the group of boys off even more, and one of them says, "He's laughing." Like, these are quotes. Quote, "He's laughing, hit him again." And from there, the beating got worse. At some point, Robert was knocked on the ground, being beaten, kicked, stomped, and all Sophie could do was just stare in horror. 5 boys had completely decided to beat this man for no reason, and Sophie's just frozen, screaming and crying, but unable to do much of anything because clearly they could turn on her as well. And that is a very difficult position to be in, watching the love of your life being absolutely brutalized by a group of 5 teenage boys for no goddamn reason. Eventually Robert is beaten unconscious, and they don't get bored for a good few more minutes after that. They are kicking him, stomping his head, jumping on his neck. They would continue until eventually they did get bored and wander off. Sophie at this point is completely hysterical and runs to Robert's side, kneeling and cradling his head. She is screaming and sobbing and begging Robert to wake up. Unfortunately, this would alert the group of boys to go back, and they began to beat Sophie, who at this point was still holding on to Robert. They punched her, kicked her, literally stomped on her, and when she collapsed to the ground, that's when they literally started to jump up and down on her head.
What kind of... Okay, first of all, did they ever catch these kids?
They did.
Okay, what are their names? Do you have their names?
I have their names. I will get into their names later.
Okay, what kind of vile little pig-nosed, shit-eating, sticky-fingered, what possessed you? Who is your mother? Because I'm gonna beat the shit out of whoever their mother is.
Yeah, it's not great. And you're gonna get more pissed off
Shocker.
later. Okay. Thankfully, at this point in time, a 15-year-old girl was nearby, and she ran to call emergency services. She was sobbing on the phone and saying, quote, "Poor guy, I don't know him and I'm crying my eyes out. I think he might be dead." While she didn't witness much, she was able to tell the operator to send an ambulance and that, quote, "This mosher has just been banged because he's a mosher." While the girl is on the phone, you can also hear a young man who, we don't know his name, but he's actively trying to de-escalate the situation in the background. He's talking to the group saying, "Get the fuck off of him now, please. He's on the floor, man. He's on the floor, man. He's practically fucking dead." End quote. As this call is continuing, the group is still continuously beating, kicking, and jumping on Sophie, while the caller is trying to keep the operator informed of what injuries she could see, namely that the couple was still breathing, but there was blood practically pouring from their heads, which is pretty typical of head wounds.
Yeah, head wounds breed, even if they're not super serious, head wounds bleed a lot. I don't know why. They just do.
The operator tried to walk her through, stopping the blood flow, but the girl stated that there was just too much, and it was coming from Robert and Sophie's eyes, nose, and just everywhere.
Oh, so they're hemorrhaging bad, brain hemorrhaging.
Mm-hmm. While on the phone, Robert starts choking on his own blood, and the teen girl was able to get him into the recovery position to stop him from choking on his own blood.
Really quickly, for anyone who doesn't know what the recovery position is, highly recommend looking it up. It is a very important thing. I've had to put people in the recovery position before.
Yeah, it's very important to know. When the paramedics arrived, they could very easily identify Robert due to his wallet, but they were unable to identify the girl that was laying next to him. They took Robert and the Jane Doe to the hospital as the police remained in the park to question any potential witnesses.
Did the kids just run off?
Yeah.
Once the police got there?
Yeah.
My God. Pussies.
As they were interviewing witnesses, one stated that they had seen a group of boys leaving the park bragging about the quote-unquote good they've done. Another witness claimed that they had been told by the group that there were two moshers in the park. You want to see them? They're a right mess, end quote. There was also a group of kids who had also witnessed the attacks. This group claimed to have seen the attackers, quote, jumping up and down on Sophie's head, and to the group it felt like watching a group of kids kick a ball around. Back at the hospital, it was very tense. Both victims were severely beaten, and both had fallen into comas by the time they arrived. While Robert had been identified by the fact that his wallet had been located on his person, in reality, without that, he wouldn't have been recognized. The beatings had completely made him, both Sophie and Robert, unrecognizable. The doctors weren't sure that either victim would survive. The chances were very low, and if they did, there would be considerable amounts of brain damage due to the injuries they had obtained. They were rushed back to emergency surgery and placed on life support. While the hospital staff worked to save the couple's lives, the police were dealing with the investigation. At that point in time, it was an incredibly severe assault and potentially double murder given the updates from the hospital. The first unknown in the case was the identity of the girl who had been beaten with Robert. So, since they had been found together, they went to Robert's family, who, since Sophie was his girlfriend, stated that was more than likely Sophie Lancaster. The police went to her family home, and initially there was nobody there. Sylvia and her husband were both at work at the time, and from what I understand, Adam didn't live at home anymore. The police left a card with a note saying, "Call us back, it's urgent." So when Sylvie comes home and sees this note, she decides to check her phone because she has a personal phone and like the phone at her job. She leaves her personal phone at home to avoid distractions.
Yeah, that's fair.
So she decides to check the personal one first just to see if there's like anything going on that
Like
any
a
information.
personal issue that might like give her an idea of what's happening.
Yeah. She sees several missed calls and texts from her son and Sophie's older brother, Adam. She calls Adam back, who then informs her that Sylvia had been attacked and was in the hospital. Sylvie then dropped everything and went to go stay with Sophie in the hospital. During the first few days of the investigation, the police would interview over 100 witnesses in regards to the attacks. Most of them were young because the park was a hotspot for underage drinking and general mischief. Interviewing these witnesses proved to be difficult, to say the least, as many were not being completely honest for numerous reasons. They may have been doing something illegal, or they knew who the attackers were, or they were maybe just afraid of retaliation from the attackers. Because, I mean, you just watched this group of people beat up two fully grown adults. Imagine what they could do to somebody their own age.
Yeah. How old was Sophie at the time?
Sophie, I think, was like 20.
Oh, geez, so young.
Yeah, she was
She's barely an adult.
20. Yeah, but the point was that there are so many different reasons that the dishonesty, for the dishonesty. So the police force came up with a tactic to get the kids more comfortable with talking. They sent in younger officers, the ones that were closer to like their age, to help them feel more like they could be more open instead of sending in like the older guys. And it worked for the most part. From these interviews, police gained vital information. For one, this is a straight up assault. Sophie and Robert did not instigate the attack, nor did they ever fight back. They also learned the motive. It was just because these two looked different. Witnesses stated that they heard the two being called goth, mosher, emo, freak, and weirdo as they were being beat up. From these interviews as well, the police were able to put together a list of the 5 boys who participated in this attack. 17-year-old Daniel Mallet, 17-year-old Joseph Hulme, his younger brother, 16-year-old Danny Hulme. I think it's Hulme.
Might be.
It's
probably Hulme.
Hulme. Probably Hulme.
Probably Hulme.
I'll use Hulme from now on.
No, fuck up their last names. I don't give a shit. Fuck them.
16-year-old Ryan Herbert and a 15-year-old Brendan Harris. All 5 boys were arrested for grievous bodily harm, which is the British equivalent to like assault.
Yeah.
They were first arrested for this in relation to Robert Maltby.
What a British way to fucking say that. I hate the British. I don't. But like emotionally.
Yeah. During their interrogations, the boys didn't really take any of this seriously. They were laughing and joking around with the interviewers and with their own parents.
Oh, so the interviewers and the parents were taking this as a joke?
No, they were trying to joke with the interviewers. Due to the lack of actual information that was being shared during these interviews, the police let them be released on bail for about a week before they were rearrested on the same charge, but for the case of Sophie Lancaster, because they only arrested them in relation to Robert at the time. They didn't do it together.
That's probably smart.
After this go around, the eldest 3 were let out on bail, while the younger 2, Ryan Herbert and Brendan Harris, remained in custody. When doing background checks on the boys, the younger 2 had came up in connection to a similar attack earlier in the year. While nowhere near as intense as the attack on Robert and Sophie, it was still completely random and just like the attack on those 2 were.
Oh, and let me guess, they didn't fucking get anything for that. They were just like a slap on the wrist.
Probably, yeah.
That
So for the police, there was already the history there, at least for the two younger boys. So they could kind of keep them in for longer versus the two older boys. As the investigation progressed, the medical staff were astounded to see that Robert seemed to be making a very quick recovery. He had major internal bleeding, which was extremely worrying to the staff, but 10 days after the attack, Robert Maltby woke up from his coma. As theorized by the staff before, Robert's brain was impacted by the attack. He had no memories of the days leading up to the night of the attack, and he couldn't give any information whatsoever. Sophie Lancaster, however, wasn't making the same amount of progress as her boyfriend, and she actually wasn't making any progress at all. Her injuries were just so much worse than her boyfriend's, which was astounding, like all things considered. She had to be transferred from the ICU where she had been since the night of the attack to a whole new hospital in Salford because the hospital where she was just wasn't advanced enough to deal with her injuries.
I keep finding myself hopeful that she's going to come out of it knowing that she dies.
I know. I do too. Once at this new hospital, a complete list of her injuries had been made. Bruises of very clear shoe prints on both sides of her face. Her ears were so damaged by the kicks that they were black and full of pus and swollen.
Oh my god.
So much of her hair had been torn out in the attack that she was actually missing parts of her scalp. And her neck was completely black due to the bruising. In addition to making notes of these injuries, the medical staff decided to send Sophie in to conduct scans to try to take note of just how much internal damage she'd been subjected to. Unfortunately, there was no brain activity during one of these scans.
Oh, so she was like, I mean, she was gone. They were just keeping a body alive. And that's like a really terrible way of saying it, but I mean, I hate the word brain dead.
But that's essentially what she was. Her body was alive, but her brain just wasn't. So there was no way for her to recover from any of her injuries, from anything. It was just a matter of time before she had to be taken off of life support. And on August 24th, 2007, Sophie Lancaster had been taken off of life support by her family and passed away. She was 20 years old. She had been in a coma for 13 days. Robert was completely heartbroken by this news. By this point, his memories hadn't returned, but he had been told what happened. He knew his girlfriend had died essentially protecting him, and now he had to go home to an apartment that was empty and lacking her warmth as he continued to physically recover from the attack. With Sophie Lancaster's death, all 5 suspects were charged with murder and brought back into the station to re-interview the boys about that night. From the beginning of this now murder investigation, the police were focusing mostly on Brendan Harris and Ryan Herbert due to the fact that they have a history of randomly attacking people. So they were focusing heavily on the 2 youngest.
Mm-hmm.
This was enough for the police to gain a warrant to search their homes. The search turned up a few things of interest, namely the clothes that the boys had been wearing that night. One of them hadn't washed his clothes since the night of the attack, and blood was still all over the front of the jeans he had been wearing that night.
Okay, first of all, ew. Second of all, you dumbass.
It had been almost 2 weeks since the attack.
So he was just keeping that as a trophy at that point.
We don't know.
No, I'm telling you. That is that wasn't a question. That wasn't a hypothesis. I'm telling you.
I'm very. I don't mean to laugh. I'm just.
If these kids are still alive right now, they won't be soon. That's a promise.
You're gonna hate how this ends.
Oh, of course I'm gonna fucking hate how this ends, because if they're not dead, I'm not happy. I'm a very violent person.
Sending in the outfits for testing would reveal that the blood was a mix of both Sophie and Robert's blood. So they got the physical evidence.
Shocker.
Along with this information, while in custody, Ryan Herbert was talking with his mother, unaware that the police do in fact record and listen to phone calls.
I'm sorry.
So Well, he's also like 14 or 15 at this point.
Okay, and he should be, if you're gonna commit murder, you gotta be smart enough to know that police are always listening to you. Big Brother's always watching, my guy.
That's fair. During the call, his mother was trying to reassure him, basically saying things like, "You told me you had nothing to do with it. And if that's true, they won't find anything and you'll be home soon." Which,
I
like,
have words. I have words for this mother. She's a normie, isn't she?
probably,
Fuck
but
that
like,
bitch.
but he also told her that he had nothing to do with it. Like, and she was like,
Okay,
"Yeah,
and
if you're telling the truth, if like she's fully said, if you're telling me the truth, then you'll be home soon."
she knows damn fucking well he is not telling the truth. No mother is that fucking stupid. Sorry, I'm very
No,
angry right
but mothers can be willingly blind.
now. She's about to be willingly dead.
Oh my
Continue.
gosh.
For legal reasons, all of this is a joke.
He actually would admit to his mother that he did have a role in the attack and murder.
Oh.
So now, with everybody back in custody and with Sophie dead, all the boys were like a little bit more willing to talk.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because it's like whenever it was an attack, it didn't matter, but now there's a dead person, so that immediately jumps up the charges.
Oh, so when you nearly kill someone, it's funny and a joke. But when someone's actually dead, suddenly you think people might actually be serious about this. So if I beat the shit out of these kids, but they don't die, then I can joke and fun around with them at the end of the day. But if I accidentally kill one, suddenly I maybe need to double check and make sure that my doors are locked at night. Cool. I'll keep that in mind. Thank you.
The three older boys of the group wanted to make it clear that while they did play a role in the attack as a whole, the attack on Sophie was specifically done by the two younger boys, Ryan and Brendan, but Ryan was the true instigator of that attack. So they were like, "Yes, we beat the fuck."
You know,
We
go ahead.
They're like, "Yes, we fully beat Robert, but like Sophie was not us. That was not us." And to be fair, the prior arrest for the random attack was for the two younger boys. The three older boys had almost a completely clean record. They had never really done anything like this before.
Okay, yeah, some part of me is one, not believing them, and two, not believing the whole, oh, I, a 17-year-old, was totally roped into this from a clean criminal record by these little 15-year-olds, and these little kids are the ones that did it. Yeah, for some weird, crazy, bonkers reason, I just don't fucking believe that. Sorry about it.
The three older boys would admit to their role in the attack on Robert, but claimed to have no role in the attack on Sophie. Even Brendan Harris was more willing to talk, trying to claim less of a role in the attack on Sophie, like the three older boys.
Okay, but you know what's going to be really fucking interesting is if it was Robert that died instead of Sophie, suddenly they had nothing to do with Robert, but they were involved with the Sophie situation. So, yeah, crazy. I just still don't fucking believe him.
They were all questioned separately, so they didn't have time to collaborate on their stories, and there's actually a very clear timeline that emerges later on.
I'm sure there is. I still don't fucking believe these kids. Like, look, this can be my Hindenburg if you want it to be my Hindenburg, but there is not a single shred of my existence that believes that any single one of them had the fleeting thought of maybe this isn't something I should be involved in.
Oh no, they all fully, like, I'm sure they all fully was like, maybe we shouldn't, but at that point in time, it's just kind of like, it's late. Everybody's amped up on adrenaline, and it literally, like, psychologically, it literally becomes this mob mentality. It's the same thing with the Shonda Scherer case. They, like, all of the girls looking back were like, "Oh my god, why did I do that?" But because
What
they
are you
were
talking
there,
about?
like with certain, like the Shonda Scherer case,
I
where
don't know what the case is.
it's a case of a girl who was attacked by like kids her own age for dating one of their for one of the group's exes, and then like
I've never heard the story in my life.
they like completely brutalized her for like most of the night, like taking turns beating her and like spraying things on her, and like they ended up they thought she was dead, so they tried to burn her body, and it turns out she wasn't dead and she died from smoke inhalation.
Is it the girl that was in that they set fire on the road?
I don't know
That
if
was
they
in the
said-
back of the trunk?
I think so.
Because that story fucks
No.
me up, but that doesn't sound like her. It was the little
It's-
girl.
Oh, it wasn't a little girl. Like it was a little girl. She was in middle school when she died.
I don't remember, but anyway,
But a lot of it,
I have no sympathy for these kids, so
I know,
I hope
but
they're
like
suffering.
psychologically speaking, it is like very much the mom mentality, and it would explain why whenever they initially jumped in, they all were all on board, but once they walked away, and then the other, like the two youngest, went back for Sophie, that explains why they didn't join back in. It was like their adrenaline had already been burned out. Like the mentality was like their brains were slowly clearing back up, and it's very like it happens a lot where somebody who's the youngest is actually the mastermind. Like it happens quite frequently. Like just from like a psychological perspective, it makes sense.
I'm sure then it makes sense now that I've been given this information. I still don't care.
That's fair.
But like you said, it's okay as long as they just get beaten almost to death, but not to death, right? So we're good. Cool. Thank you.
I never said that.
That's
but
all the justification I need.
I didn't say that, but okay.
They said it.
Yeah, pretty much.
These bitches better not be alive anymore.
Even Brendan Harris is more willing to talk, trying to claim less of a role like the three older boys, even though he was still directly involved in the attack on Sophie. But Ryan was literally only saying no comment during the interviews. Like he refused to talk. So the police were forced to be a bit more creative. When sending the boys to a juvenile detention center, the investigators decided to bug the van in case the boys decided to talk to each other about the attack. And these are teenage kids, so of course they're going to talk.
Look, I don't like the police. But that's smart.
I don't like the police because this has been like a pattern, and these boys are like already showing patterns of random attacks. I think that had the police done their job better, this wouldn't have happened. But this is arguably kind of smart.
I don't
Not to
like
give
the
them any
death
credit.
penalty. But
the death penalty was not an option because all of these boys were underage at the time.
if you can kill someone like that, then you are not a child, you are scum.
I'm aware. This plan actually does work out because both Brendan and Ryan are like go into detail with the talking about the attack. Ryan even stated that he kicked Sophie's head, quote, like a football, which lined up with several witness statements and the injury reports.
What a dumb motherfucker.
With the trial coming up quickly, all five boys were facing murder charges, with Ryan getting the worst of it due to the fact that he was, at that point in time, known as the main instigator, which was true.
And this is one of the 15-year-olds, right? There's three 17-year-olds and a 15-year-old.
There's two 17-year-olds, a 16-year-old. Hold on.
And then two 15-year-olds. Like the 17 and 16 were brothers, something like that. I don't know, man.
I passed it. Hold on.
I don't put space in my head for assholes like this.
There are two 17-year-olds, two 16-year-olds, and one 15-year-old.
Oh, interesting. Okay, cool. So the youngest.
Ryan, the main instigator at this point, is 16, and Brendan is 15.
Gotcha.
Ryan's legal team at this point in time was trying to get the charges dropped to the lower manslaughter instead of murder because they believed Ryan was autistic, and that's why he wasn't fully responsible for the murder.
Oh my!
The prosecution comes through. The prosecution comes.
Fucking kidding me.
I know. Prosecution comes through. Prosecution looked at it and went, okay, fine. We'll play along. And they brought in several autism experts to evaluate Ryan. And all of them said that Ryan was as neurotypical as you could get.
Of course he's fucking neurotypical. Sorry.
So
love you, normies.
So that defense fully got thrown out, but also that is very
it's the same energy as I'm autistic, therefore I can't lie.
I'm autistic, so I can't lie or cheat or do anything bad ever. No. But it's also continuing the infantilization. Thank you. Of people who are neurodivergent, specifically people who are autistic. And it's really annoying.
I have met some autistic people who are fully aware of what they're doing and are and I'm not saying it's because they're autistic, but I have met people who happen to have autism who are some of the most intelligent, shitty ass people you'll ever meet in your goddamn life. And it fully is just they're bad people.
Yeah, like it's
I've also met autistic people that are super sweet and I love them very much. It doesn't matter if you have autism or not. If you're an asshole, you're an asshole. It doesn't matter what disease you have or what illness you have or what spectrum you're on or what underwear you buy. If you're a shitty person, you're a shitty person.
Yeah.
Everybody poops, even the queen.
fair enough.
I got so jazzed the day I got to tell Psychos that the queen was dead. It was the greatest day of my life.
Almost done.
Almost dead.
Kind of. On March 10th, 2008, the very first day of the trial, Ryan actually confessed to everything from starting the attack. So he was from starting the attack to murdering Sophie, which, while fantastic was the family, it was actually a lot more difficult for the justice system because he waited until the day the trial started because he had been proclaiming his innocence the entire time. So it wasted tax dollars, it wasted time, it wasted energy just for him to walk into court on the very first day and go, "Oh, I actually did it all." Like, it is,
That's a choice.
it's an incredibly manipulative and shitty choice, in my opinion.
Are we really surprised that he's manipulative and shitty? Are we really fucking surprised?
No. So, because everything had to be completely reevaluated, they had to figure out what was going on. In the end, the three elder boys admitted to being responsible for the attack on Robert.
Do the witnesses agree that not all 5 boys were attacking Sophie?
I could not find that information.
Okay, then I'm going to assume all of them did it. Guilty until proven innocent.
That's not how that works.
It is to me.
So in the end, the three elder boys admitted to being responsible for the attack on Robert, which got the murder charges for them dropped. So they were only facing the grievous bodily harm charges for the attack on Robert.
Oh, because they weren't responsible for Sophie's death.
Yeah.
Quote unquote.
And it ended up with this new theorized version. Police believed that Brendan was actually the youngest, was actually the one to throw the first punch that night, which led to the other boys joining in to beat Robert unconscious. When Sophie didn't get involved, but whenever Sophie started trying to help Robert after they had left, the two younger boys went back while the three older boys hung back just to watch and kind of keep people away.
I feel like there's a charge for that.
So they hung back while Brendan and Ryan attacked and murdered Sophie. Brendan, at this point in time, because Brendan was the one to initiate the entire attack, he was the one to throw the punch, even though it wasn't him who said he's a monster, hit him. A lot of people theorize that was actually Ryan who said that, but because Brendan was the one who got physical first, he got the longer sentence. Brendan got sentenced to life with a minimum of 18 years.
Good.
Ryan Herbert was sentenced to life with a minimum of 16 years and 3 months, which after an appeal was reduced to 15 years and 6 months.
But still life.
6 months. But still life, and you're going to get angry with me after this.
They better be dead.
They're not.
Motherfucker.
Daniel Mallet was sentenced to 4 years and 4 months, while Joseph and Danny Holm were both sentenced to 5 years and 10 months.
Okay. They all at least got into jail.
Yeah, they all at least got jail time.
Okay. Not happy, but okay.
We're going to jump to the Sophie Foundation, which is the Stamp Out Prejudice, Hatred, and Intolerance Everywhere Foundation, shortened to Sophie. And it was founded by Sophie Lancaster in honor of her daughter's memory. All of this information I'm going to be reading out, I got directly from the website.
Okay.
The first event that was hosted was the Make a Noise event on November 26, 2007, a celebration of Sophie's life on what had been her 21st birthday, and this would become an annual event instead of just a traditional memorial. And what the Make a Noise event was it was a bunch of people coming around, playing music, just being loud and proud about who they are, because Sophie would have hated moments of silence. They wanted to do something that felt more what Sophie would have wanted.
Yeah, that's sweet.
So every year on her birthday, the Make a Noise event continues.
Do they still do that even though the mother passed away?
I think so. I think this is the first year that, no, I lied. She passed back in 2022, but I think it still goes on.
Okay.
But it's something that's like in England for now. And I know they did it digitally or virtually during the pandemic.
Oh, at least they kept it going.
Yeah. In 2008, Sylvia was approached by Julian Kynaston, who owned the makeup brand Lamasqua. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm so sorry.
Man.
And from there, the foundation kind of came together. 2009 was actually a very busy year for the foundation. Sylvia met with a justice minister at the Ministry of Justice to talk about including their alternative subculture inclusion into the hate crime definition.
Mm-hmm.
The foundation was fully registered as like a fundraiser, like charity type thing in that year as well.
Yeah.
And at the Bloodstock Festival, a heavy metal music festival that's been around since like 2005, renamed their second stage to become the Sophie Lancaster stage. This goes on to become a huge honor to play on, even if it's not the headliner stage.
Yeah, you mentioned this because Skins played on that stage before, you said.
Yeah, Skin played on it at the most recent Bloodstock.
Yeah.
But like a lot of people who are invited, like I know Delane as a band, they wrote a song about Sophie specifically, and Bloodstock invited them to play the main stage, and they actually were like, can we actually play the Sophie Lancaster stage? Because it feels really weird to perform the song that we wrote specifically for Sophie on a stage that's,
Like, not hers.
yeah. So they're very active in like the Bloodstock community as well.
Mm-hmm.
In March of 2013, Sylvia, Professor John Garland, and Dr. Paul Hawkinson published a formal definition of alternative subculture, which would help in the next month, April of 2013. It would help the Greater Manchester Police become the first police force to record incidents against alternative people as hate crimes.
That's
Like
good.
it would help people like slowly like start using this as basis for describing hate crimes.
Is that a thing in the US or is it just in Manchester?
From what I could find, it's just in the UK. Like it's just in England.
Wow, that should definitely be a thing globally. It should 100% be a thing in the US. But I mean, it's the fucking US.
After years of fighting for her daughter and ensuring that the community had rights that her daughter did not have, Sylvia died after battling an illness on April 12th, 2022. While it was not stated what the illness was, and it was like, it actually kind of was sudden.
She suddenly got sick.
No, she was sick for a while, but like she wasn't expected to die, so
Oh, so she was sick, but her death was very sudden.
yes.
Got it.
Which is completely heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Robert Maltby, Sylvia's boyfriend. I'm gonna give you a small update on him.
You okay?
I'm okay.
Okay.
Robert has mostly recovered since that night. He now lives 10 minutes away from the park where he was brutally attacked and where Sophie died, and he currently lives with his parents. For the first 10 years after the attack, he didn't really speak to the press. He was just trying to get a hold on his life. He just wanted to be, quote, Robert Maltby, the artist, not Robert Maltby, the victim of a horrific attack with the dead girlfriend. And that was his words.
Yeah, that's fair.
To Maltby, the media focused on their appearance in the aftermath of the crime felt like a form of victim blaming. Besides being patronizing, the Goth thing was also an oversimplification of a much broader issue, he explains. Life hasn't progressed in these four areas. There is still that dissatisfaction, that stagnation. These areas are still forgotten, and the forgotten people will feel like, well, it can breed nihilism. I have never tried to demonize the attackers, and in many ways, they were victims as well. End quote. He is now currently in a long distance relationship, and for him, life will never be the same, but he is still attempting to move on. As of this recording, Brendan Harris remains in jail.
Good.
The three older boys were released already, having served their terms.
Where are they?
I don't know.
Continuing off of last episode, I'm fucking coming for you guys. And I am violent. I'm the baby from that one movie, The Croods. Release the baby. That's me.
Oh gosh. And Ryan Herbert was released from jail on parole in 2022, and a lot of people think that Sylvia fighting to keep him in jail was what caused her death. They
like
believe,
stress?
like, just from the stress of the fact that this one of her daughter's killers was getting out
Yeah.
so early.
Yeah.
Because he was supposed to be in jail for about 15 years, and he was, but it was minimum 15 years, but you're supposed to be in there for life, and now you're out on parole.
Yeah.
And leading up to his release, she fought like hell to get him, like, make him stay in jail, to continue serving out this life sentence in jail.
Mm-hmm.
And that is my case.
Okay, so have they all been released?
As of this recording, as of me doing my research, like writing these notes, and I finished these notes a couple days ago. Brendan Harris, the youngest and the one that had the longest minimum sentence, is still in jail.
Good.
The other four are released.
It's safer for him that he's in there and I'm out here. You look so angry.
I'm angry. I'm very upset. I entirely understand Robert's point of view too,
Do you
because
need to take a second?
No, I'm okay.
Are you sure?
I'll take a second after we're done.
Okay.
Because I pulled specifically from an interview with The Guardian. Like, his quotes were specifically from an interview that he did 10 years after the fact. And this was like the first time he'd like really spoken out about it. But and I feel like he really hits the nail on the head. Like, it's not just like us being reduced, like them being reduced to just being goth, and that was the reason why they attacked. It completely ignores everything else.
It also goes back to that frustration that I think you had at the beginning, where you can't find anything about her outside of her attack. And now you have someone where he doesn't want to be a victim. He wants to be a person.
Yeah, he
And
just wants to be an artist. He doesn't like the thing that he quote, like, he just wants to be Robert Maltby the artist. He said that he wanted that on his tombstone and not Robert Maltby, the victim of an attack with the dead girlfriend. Like, he straight up said he doesn't want that on his tombstone.
and this is probably information we're never going to get, but I'm wondering how emotionally he's had to move on from not only like suffering the attack, but also like losing someone that he clearly loved like a lot. Like, it has to be really difficult for him in general to move past that, and then to have the media also kind of push it. Like, I I don't ever plan on losing you, but I think if I ever did, I would be, I mean, it would be devastating. It would probably take me 10 fucking years to be able to walk outside, but I think it would be difficult to it's already hard emotionally to accept that you have to continue going on as a person outside of losing someone like that. But then also to have the media boil you down to just the person who lost that person. I imagine it's a lot of slowly accepting that you still have to continue on. Like, you have to keep going. Like, you don't, and then also to have to then process with yourself that you exist more than that. And then you have to reassure yourself that that's who you are. And then the media is not letting you have that peace. Like, it might sound harsh probably to some people of like, oh, well, why doesn't he want to honor Sophie, and why doesn't he want to do this? But like, he's still a person who exists outside of her. And as unfortunate as it is that this is a situation he's in, like, we don't know if he's ever gonna find a relationship. We don't know if he's ever gonna move on romantically from this.
He
And if
is currently in a long distance relationship with somebody in America.
Oh,
So he has like romantically moved on, but he no longer dresses the way he used to. He like
I
does
imagine
more.
he's traumatized.
Yeah, he's more in sweats and stuff. He actually had to stop school for like a good bit. Like, he couldn't go back for like a few years, and then he like at the time of the interview, which was 2017, he had just finished his degree. It's heartbreaking because
he just wants to be a person again, and it's so hard to be a person when like you and I'm speaking from a personal experience here, but it's really hard to move on as a person when it feels like you're constantly defined by the worst thing that's ever happened to you. But also it's so hard, like this is something I struggle with. It's so hard to exist and remind myself that like I am more than the things that have happened to me. And I imagine that's really, really, really hard for him to do too. But also like it's it's a feeling that's really difficult to explain.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking, and it, like, going back to the beginning of the episode where I'm like, why is the most important thing Sophie ever did was, like, why is her death the most important thing she ever did? Like, it, and it kind of like rubs me in a weird way, especially when it comes to cases where the victims have been, their death is the cause for so many different, like, legislation changes. Thank you. And it's like you're putting so much into these victims' death, and it slowly starts to, like, at least I've noticed in the true crime space, especially with cases like these where it's like, oh, this person had to die in order for these changes to be made, and to which I raise the question, why? Why are we as why are we as a culture, as a society, at least in cultures that do have these legislation branches, like in England and here, why do people have to die before things change? Why isn't it enough to just see something horrific going on and want to stop it? Why do we cling so much to how things were before?
But also it's like the lack of, and this is where I really do hate the justice system a little bit, because it's almost like a willingness to want to assume the best in people, and I'm saying that in quotes because you're not assuming the best in people, you're not wanting to like jump the gun on certain things. And I wish we trusted our guts just a little bit more when it comes to like, this is very clearly something that is going to turn into something much worse if we don't step in. But then like the justice system will probably be like, oh well, we don't want to step in because we don't want to assume that it's going to escalate to that like innocent until proven guilty. But like you just got to accept that some people are terrible, and if you don't step in soon enough, like the modern justice system does not account for the thousands of years of like human evolution, of your gut feeling, of your intuition, of knowing that sometimes people are just bad people. And are there very weird like nuances in this stuff? Are there very weird circumstances that we can't calculate for?
Yeah.
Yes, but if you have two kids with a history of violence, and you have these people who are alternative, and you see that this is a thing that happens consistently, like the only thing that you're doing is making it obvious with the fact that you do not care about helping anyone unless they are fitting into a specific type of person that you want them to be. And it's like you trying to feign ignorance, but you're really just making it obvious that you're just a shitty person. But it's like the entire justice system. And I also, sorry, second part of this rant that I really find annoying too, now that I'm focusing on this, is in no way am I trying to take away from the fact that like this was a horrible situation of what happened to Sophie. But the only difference between Sophie and Robert is that Sophie died and he didn't. Like, why is he not like, and again, I understand this is a terrible thing that has happened, and I'm not trying to take away from what happened to Sophie at all. But why is it so focused heavy on her when the only difference between the two is that she died and he didn't? He got attacked first. He got the shit beat out of him. They didn't think either of them were going to live. She just died and he didn't. And it feels like that isn't being taken into account enough.
I agree. I fully agree, but I also think it comes down to how Robert and his family reacted.
Like they just kind of shut down.
Yeah, they hunkered down around Robert. They fully, like, they did support Sophie's family where they could, but to them, Robert's recovery was far more important.
Which
And
it is.
it is. It's really is. And Sylvie couldn't like, especially with her background in social work and working with kids like Sophie, she couldn't handle another potential death of somebody who could look and act just like her daughter. She couldn't handle like the mental thought of it, so she went hard into it. She went to the like she tried so hard to raise awareness for it, and I think in doing so, and I hate to speak ill of the dead, but I think she might have left out Robert's side of things, because on the timeline on the website, it kind of mentions Robert, but only briefly. It is focusing solely on Sophie and her story.
So this is a weird question, and this might piss some people off. But you mentioned at the very beginning that like Robert and Sophie were like the same person. They're very, very, very similar people. Seeing how Robert responded to what happened, do you think Sophie, like, i- if they are similar people, it's interesting how Sophie was almost made a martyr, and that feels like maybe something that, I don't know, she would have been a martyr or wanted to be a martyr.
I don't think she did. I know she wanted to help people. Like, that was like one of the things that she always wanted to do. That's like something that was consistent across everything that I found about Sophie's, that she wanted to help people. She wanted to support people. I don't think
And
she
like,
would have.
unfortunately, she did help people, just not in the way that I think the world probably would have needed from her.
Yeah.
But it's unfortunate that someone who, it's weird to me, like, she was a little bit more reserved, she kept her head down, she didn't want to get involved in all this stuff, and now she's a martyr. Like, it's I'm not trying to speak on Sophie's behalf and say like that's this, that, or the other thing, but
I think that if Robert had died, I think Sophie wouldn't have hunkered down. I think she probably would have reached into what she had learned from her mother to make sure nobody forgot about Robert. And I think had they both survived, I think she probably would have gone into the community outreach side of things, but I don't know that they would have gotten as much of attention if one of them didn't die. And that is the sick part of this whole thing. This is why I hate, in a lot of cases, this is why I hate true crime. And sometimes nobody cares unless somebody dies. And that
yeah,
is,
that's just media in general though. And I'm not saying it's good, but like that really is like, I mean, like, you're right. Like, and it does suck. Like, why, I agree with you. Why does it take someone dying for us to try to step in and stop something from happening? And even when people die, like, no one seems to care unless it's like for the morally, socially acceptable reason to care, you know?
yeah, like, I think that, my personal opinion, I don't think Sophie should be as martyred as she is. It
Feels disingenuous.
it does. I fully agree that Sophie did not deserve this, and that Sophie does deserve to be remembered, but I don't think she should be remembered for the fact that she happened to be an alternative person who was murdered. I feel like if anything, she should be remembered for her, like, the time she spent with her friends, the like, how she flourished in the community, how this community can genuinely help people. I feel like she should be remembered for those aspects of her life, instead of she was murdered because she was goth.
Yeah, her death was a very, very minute, small section of the years that she had spent living. And there's so many good things that happened in those years that we will never
Mm-hmm.
know. And it is genuinely devastating when you find someone who the and again, this is going to be a really blunt thing that people aren't going to like, but when the greatest thing that they ever did for this world was die, like, and I'm not saying good that they died, but I'm saying like, why are we only caring when people are dead? Like, why can't we acknowledge bad things can happen without it having to escalate to that point and still give a shit? Like, I would love to know what her favorite color was. I would love to know what her favorite book was. Did she prefer her water with ice or no ice? Like, these are important parts about her personality that make her more than just the alternative girl who got beat to death in a park. You know, like, it boils her down. And like, yes, like, the name is important, but it's not just say her name, a reminder of what happened to her. It's like, who was she though? Like, can you actually tell me who she was outside of what was done to her? Like, you know, and I can only speak for myself, but I am a lot more than the abuse that I had faced at the hands of, you know, people in my life. I'm so much more than that. And if people were to boil me down to just that, I would be livid because of all of the good that I've managed to do and all of the person that I am, you know. And I imagine for anyone else, you know, living or deceased, that would really upset them that they lived so much life, but the only thing people ever want to care about is the very last thing they ever did on this planet. And that is just so, in my opinion, disgusting. And
Yeah,
no
like,
one documents their life under the assumption that they're going to die one day and then everyone needs to know everything about them. But
yeah.
I think there's a different type of sensitivity that people should take it with when it's like how you talk about people shouldn't be their death. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
a really hard way to explain.
No, I completely understand, but that's why whenever full transparency, I almost wanted to switch to a different case because I could not find any information about, like, hardly any information about Sophie before she died, and I felt genuinely violently uncomfortable presenting this case with the most information I'm presenting being about how she died, like the injuries she had, and then, oh, this is the trial. Like, it felt disgusting to me, and I still feel a little bit gross about it. But
Yeah, Psychos is not lying, by the way. They genuinely came to me, like, not even last week, and was like, I don't have the time to change to a different story, but I do not want to do this story. And it's because, and, you know, we research these things for a few weeks before we put them. But for the last few weeks, like, consistently, Psychos has just been telling me, like, I can't find anything on her. I don't know anything about her. Like genuinely getting like frustrated to the point of like wanting to cry over how annoyed you were that you couldn't find anything out about her. And again, if the family has decided that that is what they want to do, then that's a different story.
yeah, like, if that is the family's choice, then great. I respect that. But if it's not by the family's choice, if that is just how, if it's because if the information I can is out there and I just cannot find it because it has been drowned out by Sophie's last couple weeks on Earth, I am extremely angry about that because that is not fair to anybody.
Especially someone who you've described as having such a bright personality and such an impactful personality. Like, I'm surprised that there aren't like her friends and I don't know if she had siblings. Her siblings, yeah, she has siblings.
She
Her
had a
siblings and her
brother.
cousins and people in her family and her life that knew her, like, saying something and giving her more personality than just the goth girl, the quote unquote goth girl that was beaten in a park. Like, if that information is out there and it was not per the family's request, because again, you couldn't even find if the family had requested this stuff not be out on the internet.
Yeah, it was so hard to find anything, and I honestly do agree with Robert's mentality that reducing this case down to two young adults who were beaten just because they were goth, it's incredibly insulting. It's it takes everything away from who Sophie was as a person. We can acknowledge that her death did provide the momentum to get violence against alternative cultures labeled as a hate crime. However, it is still a disservice to Sophie herself
It's also
to
a
boil her
disservice to
down to
him.
this. Yes.
It's also a disservice to Robert, but also labeling this as the goths who got beat up in a park in a weird way almost validates the mentality of the people who did this.
Yeah, Robert specifically called it victim blaming. And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
fully
yeah,
agree
yeah,
with that sentiment.
perfect.
It fully is victim blaming, and I fully
Like, if they weren't goths, they wouldn't have gotten beat up in a park. Like,
yeah.
it is, yeah. That's a great way for him
And like
to put that.
and like if I look up Sophie Lancaster's name on YouTube, hardly anything comes up. But if I look up goth girl who was murdered, so much pops up. It is genuinely disturbing how this is me
How
just
like
ranting.
boiled down it is.
Yeah, and this is so true of so many other cases.
What was this guy's name?
Robert Maltby. Robert is spelled normally, and then Maltby. And like anything you find on him is gonna just circle back to the attacks, and I feel so awful about it.
He does not look how I expected him to look.
No, he's changed a lot. Like, but even before the attacks, if you look at pictures of them before the attacks, they don't look particularly goth. Like, they don't. Like,
She is 100% punk. Like she does have. She's got the dreads. She's got the neon colors. She's got the piercing. She's got gauges. She
Yeah,
is.
like-
She is beautiful, but she does look more like proto goth punk ish.
Yeah, they both look alternative, but also simply labeling them as like the catch-all phrase goth is also really kind of insulting to the subcultures themselves, because it shows that you don't really care enough about these people to look into the actual subcultures that they could have actually been part of and how they could have impacted their personalities. And
Can I just
and
jump in here really
everything.
fast? I found a photo of the kids, and they look exactly how I imagine shithead British guys who would beat up someone look like. They look exactly like. Picture the most douchey British guy that you can ever think of, and you're exactly right.
Yeah, like it is incredibly. I know I'm being a hypocrite because I also produce true crime, but most true crime content is narrowed down to, especially for the victims, narrowed down to how they died and what impact their death had. And that is not why, and that is not what I want to contribute to the community. I'm tired of seeing the same rehashings of a case with nothing new being added, with nothing of substance being added, and it's just like, oh, this is a tragedy, oh, this is heartbreaking. Yes, those things can be true, but all you're doing is focusing more on how.
So I'm going to read
It
this
ends.
section because I found that article you were talking about. I'm going to read this section because I think it sums it up pretty well, because he does have a really good way of saying this. So it says, by the time of the funeral, which TV news crew also attended, Maltby's brain had begun to repair, and he found it even harder. My initial memory was seeing the coffin and thinking, that's too small. He says, her entire life shouldn't have fitted into a small box. That's when I began to crumble. And I'll be honest, I was resentful of the fact so many people were there. They had the best intentions, but I was thinking, did you ever eat a meal with her? Did you know how she took her coffee? You just saw this archetype on the news. You didn't know her.
And that is exactly, like, I have never, like, this is the 4th episode, and I think this is the case where I'm really starting to dig into why I agreed to start this podcast. I wanted to give victims and victims' family a voice where they weren't reduced to how they died. And because unfortunately I did do serial killers my first few cases, and it's really hard to dig in there. But going forward, serial killers and stuff like that will be very few and far in between, because I do want to focus more on the victims. I want to learn who they were, and learning who they were I feel like it gives more meaning than just, oh, it's that goth chick who died and now alternative subcultures are protected by law. And that's so gross and disgusting. I would love to learn how Sophie took her coffee. I would love to know what series was her favorite. If she ever debated writing her own book or writing her own poetry. I would love to read some of that if she ever did. I would love to get to know her as a person. And I would have loved to present that to everybody so they just don't see this girl who died because they didn't even care to get what she was correct. She was killed because she was different, but even that is victim blaming.
So 3 years after the attack, he did release paintings that he had done to raise money for the Sophie Foundation, but I can't find anything about any art that he does now, which really sucks because I'd love to know.
I know, and that's what pisses me off.
I'd love to know what art he does. I'd love to know
I do too.
who he is.
This is why
I think I found his Instagram, unless he took it down.
Oh, no. Here it is. I found his Instagram. Oh, he's a really good artist. If this is him, it's very good.
Yeah,
Actually, I really like his art. It's that like horror
like
art. It's really good.
his art was always described as kind of being like that horror, darker art, but because he was in the alternative subcultures, it's kind of par for the course. But
If this is him, but I mean, it's his name and it says he lives in London. So
yeah,
London-based Manchester School of Art.
I'm trying to figure out how to put my words together because I am still very upset, but death and dying are not the most important things you can do in your life. I think I just want to end my piece by just saying you are more than the worst thing that ever happened to you. You are more than the worst thing that's ever been said about you. You are more than the worst thing that has ever been done to you.
He has a coloring book. I found it. I found a whole PDF of his stuff. It's in his link tree. It's really cool. Sorry.
I am angry, and I feel like I have some right to be angry, but also no right to be angry because, again, I didn't know her. I very rarely know anybody that I'm doing cases about, and I think that because I couldn't learn anything about her because she was reduced to this one thing, the worst thing that ever happened to her, that specifically is what made me so angry. Like, I should be able to look up her name and find other information that's about who she was and not a foundation that started because she died or because she's. Oh, it's so good. Sorry.
Speaking of wanting to know more, if you go to Robert Maltby's Instagram, which I'm assuming this is his guy. But if you go to his Instagram and you go to his link tree at the very bottom, it says book portfolio. Takes you to a Google Drive, and it's literally just a bunch of his artwork in PDF form. It is super cool looking. He's got an Etsy page.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a coloring book. It just looks really cool.
Yeah, we'll link his Instagram stuff below so that way everybody can go see.
Is this a tarot deck? He made his own tarot deck. It's called Arcane. It's really cool looking. There's a card called the Eye.
There's not much more I have. Like, I don't know if I can say anything else. Like, I know.
I think that's enough for today. Because we are already at 4 hours and 7 minutes.
This is a lot of editing for me.
So sorry ahead of time, guys, for this one. But I mean, I enjoyed my part of this story thoroughly.
I enjoyed your part too.
This is why I don't want to end it on a sad note, but I had to go first.
Yeah, for like historical.
For context reasons.
Yeah, for context reasons. Sorry, guys.
I think we are done here. Everyone go drink water and rest and have a snack and go listen to some good music and watch film Cooper, and we will see you back in 2 weeks. Which, by the way, whenever we release really long episodes like this, feel free to cut it in the middle, and you can have an episode a week. And then we'll be back in 2 weeks. So that'll be, when does this go out? This goes out the 24th. So we'll be back the 8th with a 2-parter that ends right before Christmas.
And both parts of the 2-parter are very dark.
Do you want to give like a little like a hint or like a riddle to what yours is? Because I know the name of Psychos's case, but I couldn't tell you jack diddly shit about what it's about.
I'll give hints on Instagram because I've started dropping like hints as to what
which
each episode is, like a few days before it drops.
Psychos is the one who runs all of our social media. So the social media is slacking a little bit. I don't have access to any of the social media because I'm not a huge social media fan. I prefer not to.
I'm not either. I'm just more. I know I'm a bit more active than you are, which is why I agreed to take on that. But I'm also not super
social
active.
media, if at all possible. This is the limits of what I am comfortable with right now.
Yeah, that's fair. You want to go ahead and say goodbye?
Goodbye, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night, guys. Stay safe and keep learning.
Fuck Oppenheimer.